Chapter 5:18. Facing the hundreds of disciples before him, Xiao Chen obviously couldn't fight them. It wasn't because he was afraid, but because these guys were too weak. Xiao Chen couldn't even muster the slightest bit of interest. Think about it. What kind of person could do such a thing in the Equal Sky sect? A true genius wouldn't do such an idiotic thing. Therefore, the hundreds of disciples in front of Xiao Chen's residence were only ordinary disciples of the Equal Sky sect. They weren't on the same level as Xiao Chen. So, how could Xiao Chen fight such people? It was meaningless. Disappear within 10 breaths. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, the disciples immediately burst into laughter. Haha, is this kid crazy? He actually wants us to disappear within 10 breaths? Why? Do you want to fight against hundreds of us alone? They laughed out loud. However, before they could finish laughing, there was a muffled bang. The person closest to Xiao Chen had already been sent flying. Xiao Chen couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with these guys. Moreover, he knew very well that it was useless to reason with these idiots. The best way was probably to talk with his fists. Sure enough, after Xiao Chen sent a person flying with a punch, the crowd's laughter came to an abrupt end. Each and every one of them were like ducks that had their necks pinched. They couldn't make a single sound. They were a little shocked. No one had expected Xiao Chen to attack as soon as he said so. He didn't care that there were hundreds of them. Moreover, after sending a person flying, Xiao Chen didn't have any intention of stopping. His feet moved and he immediately rushed into the crowd. Like a tiger entering a flock of sheep, how could these ordinary disciples of the Equal Sky sect be a match for Xiao Chen? For a moment, outside Xiao Chen's residence, one could see figures flying into the sky from afar. They were like fireworks. Attack together. Take down this kid first. Seeing that Xiao Chen was like a hot knife through butter, someone shouted angrily. However, just as he finished speaking, Xiao Chen appeared in front of him. Xiao Chen smiled coldly and said indifferently, "You'd better go to heaven." As he spoke, he punched the disciple's chin. Without any surprise, the disciple immediately shot up into the sky like a rocket, and then fell heavily to the ground. Hundreds of people were like clay chickens and pottery dogs in front of Xiao Chen. The maidservant who was hiding behind the courtyard door saw the scene in front of her. Her small mouth was already agape, and she looked as if she had seen a ghost. Previously, she was worried that Xiao Chen would be beaten up by these people. But now, it seemed that there was no need to worry about Xiao Chen at all. These hundreds of people were no match for Xiao Chen. The battle came and went quickly. In less than 15 minutes, the hundreds of disciples were lying on the ground, wailing in pain. "Ah, my hand is broken. My leg is broken. Damn it. We're from the same sect. How could you be so vicious? My face. I'm disfigured. What the **CK are you shouting for? With your looks, what's the difference between disfigurement and plastic surgery? On the other hand, this young master relies on his face to make a living." The disciples wailed one after another. Xiao Chen was speechless when he heard this. The little anger in his heart quickly dissipated. These guys did not have any killing intent in the first place. It was just that they were a little stupid, which was why they did such an irrational thing. Yes. These guys are just a little stupid. Their nature is still very good. Xiao Chen comforted himself in his heart. However, on the surface, he still deliberately pulled a long face and shouted, "Shut up. If I hear any more crying, do you believe that I will directly send you to heaven to stand side by side with the sun?" His voice wasn't loud, but as soon as these words came out, everyone immediately shut their mouth. It was as if they had pulled up their zippers. Their mouths were tightly shut, and even the sound of their breathing became extremely soft. Just a moment ago, they were extremely arrogant and clamoring to duel with Xiao Chen. But now, because of just one sentence, these guys were all obedient. Sweeping his gaze across the crowd, Xiao Chen nodded in satisfaction and said, "Not bad. Now you can all scram." Hearing this, all the disciples ran away without any hesitation. Their speed was so fast that it made one blush with shame. In less than 10 breaths, hundreds of people had disappeared from Xiao Chen's courtyard. Xiao Chen was also stunned by the speed of these disciples' escape. He whispered softly, "These guys are all experts at escaping." Xiao Chen easily sent these people away. However, he still secretly thought that he had to think of a way to solve this matter. Regardless of whether the Tianqi sect's disciples would come to find trouble with him, Xiao Chen himself didn't want to be engaged to Gu Lingyao. To put it bluntly, there was no feeling between the two of them. Although Gu Lingyao was good-looking and had a very likable personality, Xiao Chen had no intention to talk about these romantic affairs. The whereabouts of Qin Shuru and Fairy of 100 Flowers were still unknown. How could Xiao Chen think about these things? He still had to think of a way. However, when he thought of Gu Qi's cunning appearance, Xiao Chen was filled with helplessness. The chances were slim. While Xiao Chen was dealing with Gu Lingyao's admirers, Gu Lingyao was sitting alone on an unknown mountain peak in the Tianqi sect. This was a place that Gu Lingyao loved to come to since she was young. This was because very few people would come here and it was very quiet. Gu Lingyao sat on the edge of the cliff with her legs curled up. Looking at the sea of clouds below, she blushed and constantly scolded, "Damned Xiao Chen, bad Xiao Chen. It must be you. You must have said something to father. That's why father wants me to marry you. I don't want to be engaged to you. You didn't say anything to me. You didn't even give me a gift. I don't want you." At this moment, Gu Qi's figure appeared behind Gu Lingyao. He had a faint smile on his face as he said, "Girl, who don't you want?" "Ah." The sudden voice startled Gu Lingyao. She quickly turned to look at Gu Qi. For a moment she was like a child who had done something wrong. She didn't dare to look into Gu Qi's eyes. She lowered her head and blushed. Looking at Gu Lingyao's bashful expression, Gu Qi's smile deepened. "Girl, I heard you say that you don't want anyone? Who is it? Don't tell me it's that Xiao Chen? What? Are you not satisfied with father's decision? If that's the case, father will withdraw the order." Hearing Gu Qi withdraw the order, Gu Lingyao didn't know why, but she immediately panicked. She couldn't care less about anything else. She hurriedly looked up at Gu Qi and said, Don't what?" Seeing Gu Lingyao's reaction, Gu Qi's smile grew wider. At the same time, he laughed inwardly. "Little girl, do you know that the older the ginger, the spicier it is? Do you think I, as your father, can't see through your little thoughts?" Chapter 519. Seeing the playful smile on Gu Qi's face, Gu Lingyao realized that she had fallen into her father's trap. Her face, which was already red, became even redder. She rolled her eyes at Gu Qi and shouted, "I'm ignoring you." With that, Gu Lingyao ignored Gu Qi and ran away with a red face. Gu Lingyao didn't know how to feel about her engagement with Xiao Chen. She only felt that her heart was in a mess. Looking at Gu Lingyao's departing figure, Gu Qi shook his head and smiled. "Little girl, there are some things that you will have to face eventually. With Xiao Chen by your side, I can rest assured." After speaking, Gu Qi exhorted for a moment, then looked in the direction of the Moonless Empire and said, "Since I've used this kid, I'll give him some compensation. The Burning Sky Ruler is not far from breaking through to the Half-Saint realm." After speaking, Gu Qi disappeared. On this day, the Burning Sky Ruler, who was about to leave, met Gu Qi in the Moonless Empire's imperial capital. No one knew what the two of them talked about, but after speaking, the Burning Sky Ruler disappeared with Gu Qi. No one knew where they went. The warriors of the Heavenly Chen continent all thought that the Burning Sky Ruler had gone out to train. Unaware that Gu Qi had gone to find the Burning Sky Ruler, Xiao Chen was currently cultivating in the courtyard. Originally, he was very curious about the Celestial Equal Sect and planned to go to the Burning Sky Sect's Martial Skill Pavilion to see what kind of martial skills there were. However, looking at the current situation, it was probably impossible. With Gu Lingyao's matter, if he went to the martial skill pavilion now, he would definitely be surrounded by many disciples. Although Shao Chen wasn't afraid, it wasn't worth it to make trouble for himself. Therefore, after thinking about it, Shao Chen decided to obediently stay in his residence. After a day, no one came to find trouble with Shao Chen. Obviously, after violently beating up those hundreds of disciples, Shao Chen's fierce reputation had gradually spread in the Celestial Equal Sect. Now, all the disciples of the Celestial Equal Sect knew that the newcomer, Shao Chen, wasn't an ordinary person. It was best not to provoke him. The hundreds of disciples from before were the best proof. Ordinary disciples didn't dare to look for Shao Chen, but those genius disciples more or less received some news. Their masters told them not to provoke Shao Chen if there was no reason. This result was naturally the best for Shao Chen, so he was happy with peace and quiet. However, Shao Chen didn't want to be married to Gu Lingyao after a night of cultivation. Until the next morning, Shao finally went to Gu Lingyao's residence, Gu. After a night cultivation, until the next morning, Shao finally came to Gu. He didn't have any intention of getting married to Gu Lingyao, but Shao Chen knew that he couldn't convince Gu Qi to rescind the order by himself. He needed Gu Lingyao's help. As Gu Qi's only daughter, if Gu Lingyao was unwilling to get married to Shao Chen, then things would be easy to handle. Gu Qi couldn't possibly force his own daughter, right? Because of this, Shao Chen came and prepared to talk to Gu Lingyao face to face. He gently knocked on the door. Soon, the door opened and a maid poked her head out. She looked at Shao Chen and asked in confusion, "Who are you?" "I'm Shao Chen. I'm here to look for Miss Gu," Shao Chen replied softly to the maid's question. "Shao Chen?" Hearing this, a smile quickly appeared on the maid's face. She put away the guard in her heart and warmly invited Shao Chen into the courtyard. "Young Master Shao Chen, you're here to look for Miss Gu, right? Miss Gu is in the backyard right now. Let me bring you there." Since she was so warmly welcoming him, the maid must have misunderstood. However, Shao Chen didn't explain anything. This kind of situation would only make things worse if he explained. The most important thing now was to have a good talk with Gu Lingyao and reach a consensus. Under the maid's lead, Shao Chen quickly arrived at the backyard. Once he entered the backyard, the maid happily shouted, "Miss, young Master Shao Chen is here to see you." Following the maid's words, Gu Lingyao, who was originally cultivating in the courtyard, immediately looked at Shao Chen. Seeing that it was indeed Shao Chen, Gu Lingyao's cheeks instantly turned red. "What are you doing here?" Although her face was red, Gu Lingyao pretended to be calm and asked. Hearing Gu Lingyao's words, Shao Chen didn't notice her abnormality and said with a calm expression, "There's something I want to talk to you about." It was a simple sentence, but in Gu Lingyao's ears, it caused her heart to be in a mess. What does he want to talk to me about? Could it be about the engagement? If he really wants to be engaged to me, what should I do? With thousands of thoughts in her mind, Gu Lingyao was momentarily stunned. In the end, it was Shao Chen who coughed softly. Gu Lingyao came back to her senses, and a trace of panic flashed across her eyes. She said to her maid helplessly, "You can leave first. I want to talk to Shao Chen alone." She was obviously nervous. At this moment, Shao Chen also noticed that something was wrong with Gu Lingyao. After the maid left, the two of them sat down on a stone bench in the courtyard. Shao Chen looked at Gu Lingyao and asked curiously, "Is Miss Gu feeling unwell?" No. Being stared at by Shao Chen, Gu Lingyao stuttered a little as she replied. She wasn't feeling unwell, but Gu Lingyao's appearance was clearly different from usual. Although she was puzzled, Shao Chen didn't pursue the matter. Since Gu Lingyao didn't want to talk about it, then forget it. Business was more important. Shao Chen's expression turned serious as she spoke to Gu Lingyao in an extremely serious manner. Miss Gu, about the engagement between the two of us." Engagement? What do you want? Don't tell me you really want to be engaged to me?" Xiao Chen had just opened her mouth when Gu Lingyao heard the word engagement. She was like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. She jumped up and spoke incoherently. Gu Lingyao's huge reaction startled Xiao Chen. But judging from her appearance, it seemed like she didn't want to be engaged to her? This made things easier. If Gu Lingyao wasn't willing to be engaged, then the two of them could just go to Gu Qi and reject him directly. With this thought, Xiao Chen said happily, "Miss Gu also doesn't want to be engaged? That's great. This way, the two of us can go directly to the sect master and ask him to retract his order. After all, Miss Gu is the only daughter of the sect master. The sect master definitely won't force Miss Gu." Gu Lingyao also didn't want to be engaged. This really saved a lot of trouble. The words that they had prepared were now saved. Originally, they thought that the matter would be settled smoothly. But after hearing Xiao Chen's words, the originally shy Gu Lingyao's expression instantly darkened. She looked at Xiao Chen angrily and questioned, "Xiao Chen, do you not want to be engaged to me? What do you mean by this? Do you think that I, Gu Lingyao, am not worthy of you?" Chapter 520. Xiao Chen was originally full of joy, but when he heard Gu Lingyao's words, he was dumbfounded on the spot. What was going on? How could she change her attitude so suddenly? Didn't she say that she didn't want to be engaged? The speed at which Gu Lingyao changed her attitude was so fast that Xiao Chen was not prepared for it at all. Previously, she looked like she was unwilling to be engaged to him, but now she was inexplicably angry. Could it be that she wants to be engaged to me? This thought suddenly appeared in his mind, but as soon as it appeared, it was heartlessly rejected by Xiao Chen. Impossible, absolutely impossible. He had no feelings for Gu Lingyao at all. How could she be willing to be engaged to him? Here, although Gu Lingyao was usually eccentric, Xiao Chen knew that women like Gu Lingyao, whether it was Qin Shuru, Flower Fairy, or Gu Lingyao, would not casually accept a man. These three women valued relationships very much, and at the same time, their standards were very high. Ordinary people could not enter their eyes at all. He and Gu Lingyao had only been together for less than a month, and there was almost no communication between them. Therefore, it was simply impossible. He did not believe that Gu Lingyao would have feelings for him, but this was not the case. After hearing that she was going to be engaged to Xiao Chen, Gu Lingyao's heart was in a mess. She was a little conflicted, a little happy, and a little angry, but more than that, she was shy. She did not know what was going on, but what was certain was that this was not love. At most, it was a good impression. At this moment, Gu Lingyao had a good impression of Xiao Chen, but that was all. There was still a long way to go before she fell in love with Xiao Chen. Of course, Xiao Chen did not know what Gu Lingyao was thinking. At this moment, after being reprimanded by Gu Lingyao, Xiao Chen looked at her speechlessly. He did not know what this little girl was up to. Faced with Xiao Chen's gaze, the anger in Gu Lingyao's heart quickly dissipated. She did not dare to look at Xiao Chen, as if she had done something wrong. "You can go, I'm a little tired." As she spoke, Gu Lingyao personally pushed Xiao Chen out of the courtyard. Then, Gu Lingyao closed the courtyard door with a bang. After being reprimanded for no reason and then being chased out for no reason, Xiao Chen stood outside the courtyard door with a helpless and puzzled expression. What was this woman trying to do? Originally, he wanted to have a good talk with Gu Lingyao, but it seemed impossible now. After hesitating for a moment, Xiao Chen could only turn around and leave, thinking that he would come back tomorrow. After Xiao Chen left, Gu Lingyao, who was in the courtyard, was still blushing. Her mind was in a mess, and all kinds of emotions uncontrollably surfaced in her heart. Facing the engagement with Xiao Chen, Gu Lingyao was nervous and conflicted. However, when Xiao Chen said those words, and when she heard that Xiao Chen did not want to be engaged to her, Gu Lingyao did not know why, but she felt unhappy in her heart. She was angry, but more than that, she was sad and disappointed. After letting her imagination run wild in the courtyard for a long time, Gu Lingyao finally pouted as if to comfort herself. Humph, stupid Xiao Chen, ugly Xiao Chen, what do you mean by this? I haven't even done anything yet and you're already unwilling. Fine, since you don't want to be engaged to me, then I'll insist on being engaged to you. Let's see what you can do about it. Humph. She found a way out for herself. With this thought, Gu Lingyao found that she actually felt much better. Nodding slightly, Gu Lingyao murmured softly, "Yes, I want to be engaged to you. Let's see what you can do about it, ugly Xiao Chen." He was completely unaware of Gu Lingyao's thoughts. If he knew, Xiao Chen would probably be depressed to death. He originally wanted to make Gu Lingyao give up on the engagement, but who would have thought that this conversation would instead make Gu Lingyao make up her mind? He tried to be clever but ended up making a fool of himself. The next day, which was the last day before the engagement, Xiao Chen arrived at Gu Lingyao's residence early in the morning. However, he learned that Gu Lingyao did not want to see him. Moreover, this girl even activated the talisman array around Gu Lingyao's courtyard. It was obvious that she was afraid that he would sneak in. Xiao Chen was completely speechless when he saw that the courtyard was heavily guarded and looked as if it was facing a formidable enemy. What was this girl trying to do? Was she going to fight a war? Not only did she activate the defensive array, she even activated the offensive array. Without a doubt, as long as he dared to take a step into the courtyard, he would definitely not end up well. This was because the talisman array in Gu Lingyao's courtyard was personally set up by Gu Qi. It was a top-grade talisman array, and was far from something that Xiao Chen could break through with his current cultivation. Moreover, Xiao Chen was not a talisman array master. He knew nothing about breaking arrays. Gu Lingyao was determined not to see him. He waited outside the courtyard for more than 4 hours, but there was still nothing he could do. Tomorrow was the day of the engagement. Xiao Chen was secretly anxious, but there was nothing he could do. Just like that, Xiao Chen waited outside Gu Lingyao's courtyard for an entire day. However, in the end, he did not see Gu Lingyao. The next morning, when the sky had just brightened, Tian Guochuan arrived at Xiao Chen's residence. Without any explanation, he directly brought Xiao Chen to the main hall of the Equal Sky sect. Being caught by Tian Guochuan and having his cultivation sealed, Xiao Chen asked with a tearless cry, "Elder Tian, what are you doing? Young Master Xiao, please don't blame me. This old man is also under the orders of the sect master to invite you. The sect master guessed that you would not be very cooperative, so he specially ordered this old man to bring you here by force and seal your cultivation to prevent you from escaping." Tian Guochuan replied indifferently to Xiao Chen's question. Hearing this, Xiao Chen did not know what to say. Escape? He had indeed thought of running, but where could he run to? Moreover, could he escape in the Equal Sky sect? He could be considered to have completely realized that Gu Qi was forcing him to do something beyond his ability. Regardless of whether he wanted to or not, Gu Qi did not care about his feelings at all. Under Tian Guochuan's lead, Xiao Chen quickly arrived at the main hall of the Equal Sky sect. Because today was the day of the engagement of Gu Qi's only daughter, Gu Lingyao, it was naturally a major event to the Equal Sky sect. So, many people had arrived at the main hall early in the morning. Of course, all of them were the true higher-ups and core figures of the Equal Sky sect. All the Tao Emperor Realm elders were present. There were a total of 12 of them. At the same time, their disciples were present as well. In other words, they were the geniuses and geniuses of the younger generation of the Equal Sky sect. Besides that, there were also some deacons with great authority present. There were already over 1,000 people gathered in the main hall. Everyone was seated on cushions on both sides of the hall. At the same time, there was a short table placed before every single one of them. On the table were exquisite snacks, spirit fruits, fine wine, and some side dishes. Chapter 521. It could be said that almost all the experts above the Tao King realm of the Celestial Equal sect were present. Apart from them, there were also the young geniuses. Nearly 1,000 people had gathered in the main hall. They were chatting and drinking while waiting for the engagement ceremony to begin. However, compared to the older generation, the younger generation's geniuses all had ugly expressions on their faces. However, they did not dare to act out. As long as one was a disciple of the celestial equal sect, there was no one who didn't admire Gu Lingyao. Needless to say, her looks and talent went without saying. Moreover, Gu Lingyao had a half-saint father. If one could get Gu Lingyao, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that one would soar to the sky. Because of this, many disciples admired Gu Lingyao, especially the young geniuses present. But now, the goddess that they had been protecting had been taken by someone else. Moreover, it was a guy who came out of nowhere. How could they not be angry? However, they had been warned by their respective masters beforehand that no matter how angry they weren't allowed to cause trouble today. As a result, these young geniuses were naturally suppressing the anger in their hearts. As everyone waited, Xiao Chen was finally brought out of the main hall by Tian Guochuan. At the same time, Gu Qi's figure appeared out of thin air on the main seat in the main hall. When Gu Qi appeared, the elders and deacons below him stood up and bowed. "Greetings, sect master." "Haha, there's no need to be so polite. Today is the engagement of my daughter, Gu Lingyao and Xiao Chen. There's no need to be restrained. You must have a few drinks." Gu Qi laughed heartily in the face of everyone's greetings. After disappearing for 3 days, Gu Qi finally appeared. Upon hearing Gu Qi's words, the elders also smiled and congratulated him. "Congratulations to the sect master for getting a good son-in-law." "Haha, good. The atmosphere was very lively." However, no one knew what everyone was thinking behind the smiles. Gu Qi's appearance meant that the engagement ceremony had officially begun. Xiao Chen, who was outside the main hall, walked slowly into the main hall accompanied by Tian Guochuan. Although he said that he was accompanying Xiao Chen, he was actually guarding him. According to Gu Qi, he was preventing Xiao Chen from running away. Moreover, just a moment ago, Xiao Chen was taken to a room beside the main hall by Tian Guochuan and forced to change into a bright red robe. This was the first time in his life that he had been stripped naked by a man. Moreover, it was an old man. Although this old man didn't do anything to him, Xiao Chen was extremely unhappy in his heart. He thought fiercely, "Old man, remember this. One day, if I don't see you strip naked and throw you onto the Tianqi sect square, I won't hand you over to Xiao Chen." He was dressed in a long red robe, but his expression was like that of a wronged wife. He walked into the main hall. The moment Xiao Chen appeared, everyone's eyes naturally focused on Xiao Chen. The experts of the older generation were curious, while the young geniuses of the younger generation were spitting fire from their eyes. Facing everyone's gazes, Xiao Chen wanted to shout, "Damn it, I didn't do it willingly. Why are you all looking at me like that?" He was extremely depressed. However, the moment Xiao Chen entered the main hall, he found that his whole body was instantly enveloped by an inexplicable force. Under this force, Xiao Chen couldn't control his body at all. His mouth couldn't speak, and his movements seemed to be controlled by someone. Only his eyes could still move according to his will. He looked at Gu Qi, who was sitting on the main seat. Xiao Chen was sure that this was the doing of that old man, Gu Qi. The force that enveloped him was the power of laws, and the only one present who could use the power of laws was Gu Qi, a half-step saint expert. Of course, Xiao Chen didn't know that Gu Qi wasn't a half-step saint expert, but a true saint expert. Otherwise, it would be impossible for a half-step saint expert to control a person's body without anyone noticing. After manipulating Xiao Chen step by step to the center of the main hall, Gu Qi laughed as if nothing had happened. "Haha, Xiao Chen's son-in-law, after today, you and I will be a family. I hope that you will treat Lingyao well in the future. Well, ask Lingyao to come out." Gu Qi didn't give Xiao Chen a chance to reply, and answered his own question. Seeing this, Xiao Chun simply wanted to cry, but had no tears to shed. What a trap, what an old trap! Why don't you ask me first if you have the ability? If Gu Qi could ask Xiao Chun for his own opinion, Xiao Chun would definitely tell him loudly that he didn't want to. Unfortunately, Gu Qi obviously didn't intend to do so. Perhaps it was because Gu Qi wanted to guard against Xiao Chun, but he had simplified the engagement ceremony a lot. Very soon, Gu Lingyao, who was wearing a long red dress, walked in accompanied by several maids. Because it was not a wedding, Gu Lingyao did not wear a phoenix coronet, a red veil, or a red veil. Gu Lingyao came to Xiao Chen's side and glared fiercely at Xiao Chen. However, when she looked at Xiao Chen, a trace of embarrassment flashed across Gu Lingyao's eyes. The two of them stood side by side. Looking at Gu Lingyao, all the young geniuses present wanted to beat their chests and stamp their feet. They looked up to the sky and sighed, "Alas, the heavens are blind. My goddess!" However, because their master was beside them, these guys didn't dare to make the slightest move. Looking at Xiao Chun and Gu Lingyao, Gu Qi shouted loudly, "Bring the wine." Then, two maids served 2 cups of wine to the two of them. At the same time, Gu Qi continued, "After drinking this cup of wine, the marriage between the two of you is set. We'll find an auspicious day to get married in the future." Without giving Xiao Chen any chance, as soon as Gu Qi finished speaking, Xiao Chen's body began to move uncontrollably. First, he saluted Gu Lingyao. Then, he raised his head and drank the wine in his cup in one gulp. In the face of the power of the laws, Xiao Chen didn't have the slightest ability to resist. He couldn't even form a thought. After being forced to drink the wine, Gu Qi asked someone to send Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao away. As for the toast, there was no need. Anyway, what was done couldn't be undone. Xiao Chen was useless now. In the eyes of outsiders, Gu Lingyao was Xiao Chen's fiancé. After sending off Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao, Gu Qi heaved a sigh of relief. It was finally over. Then, everyone drank to their heart's content in the main hall. The main hall was bustling with noise and excitement. Meanwhile, at Gu Lingyao's residence, Xiao Chen was sent back by Tian Guochuan. Of course, Gu Lingyao also came along. After removing the seal on Xiao Chen's body, Tian Guochuan said before leaving, "You and Lingyao are already engaged. According to the sect master's wishes, the residence next door has been taken back. You can live with Lingyao in the future." Chapter 522. My residence has been taken back? I'll be living with Gu Lingyao in the future? Xiao Chen's expression changed when he heard this. But before he could say anything, Tian Guochuan had already disappeared. Without giving Xiao Chen a chance to speak, Tian Guochuan left. Xiao Chen naturally had no choice. He sighed and turned to look at Gu Lingyao's courtyard. Am I going to live here in the future? He didn't see Gu Lingyao. That little girl had rushed into her room and shut herself in. No one knew what she was thinking. Only Xiao Chen was left standing alone in the courtyard. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. At this moment, Gu Lingyao's maid came to Xiao Chen and said, "Young master, the room has been prepared. According to Mrs. Instructions, it's right next to hers." What? Next to Gu Lingyao's room? Xiao Chen was stunned when he heard this. Then, he shook his head and said, Is there no other room? It's almost okay. Is there no other room? That. Young master, the room was arranged by Mississippi. This servant can't make the decision. Why don't you ask Miss? The maid said awkwardly when she saw that Xiao Chen wanted to change rooms. Gu Lingyao had personally instructed her to arrange Xiao Chen's room. She really didn't dare to change it now. After all, without Gu Lingyao's order, there were naturally extra rooms. Gu Lingyao's residence wasn't unique, but it was enough to accommodate dozens of people. Living next to Gu Lingyao? Xiao Chen walked back to his room helplessly. He didn't know what to say. Gu Qi, Gu Lingyao, are this father and daughter pair trying to play me to death? He thought gloomily. There was no turning back. After all, the engagement ceremony was over. Now, the entire Tianqi sect knew that Xiao Chen was Gu Lingyao's fiancé. Moreover, in order to cut off Xiao Chen's last path of retreat, Gu Qi had announced it to the world. Now, the entire Danyang County knew about this matter. Moonless Empire's imperial capital, heavenly stellar residence. Bai Ruyue was sitting in the garden with a touch of anger on her face. Chen is a good kid, but his lifestyle is too unrestrained. He's only been in the Celestial Equal sect for a few days, and he's already abducted their little princess. Could it be that he played with Shui Rou and Baihua's wives? She thought that Xiao Qin was too fickle in love. In this aspect, Xiao Qin wasn't as good as his father, Xiao Qing. Look at Xiao Qing. He had been loyal to Bai Ruyue his entire life. Even as the head of the Xiao family, Xiao Qing had never thought of finding another woman. Fortunately, Xiao Qin wasn't here. If Xiao Qin knew what Bai Ruyue was thinking, Xiao Qin would definitely cry out that he had been wronged. It was simply an unforgivable injustice. Was he the one who kidnapped their little princess? He was completely forced to do something beyond his ability. Even Bai Ruyue knew about this matter, let alone others. Crown Prince's Eastern Palace. Chu Wuming was accompanying Wu Yun for a walk in the garden after dealing with political matters. At this time, Wu Yun spoke first. Your Highness, have you heard about young Master Xiao Chen's matter? Haha, you're talking about this matter? I've heard about it. This brother Xiao is really not an ordinary person. Not only is his talent outstanding, but he also has other aspects that are admirable. That Gu Lingyao is the little princess of the Tianqi sect. Her status is so noble that even I wouldn't be able to enter her eyes. But brother Xiao managed to get her in just a few days. Ha! Hearing Wu Yun's words, Chu Wuming laughed loudly. Well, Xiao Chen would not be able to clear his name even if he jumped into the Yellow River. Everyone in Danyang County knew about this. Even the Moonless Empire and the Gale Empire had sent congratulatory gift. They didn't know about the outside world. Of course, even if they knew, what could Xiao Chen do? Could he still explain it clearly now? Even if he had 100 mouths, he probably wouldn't be able to explain it clearly. For 3 days in a row, he lived under the same roof as Gu Lingyao. In these 3 days, Gu Lingyao seemed to be avoiding him. If she could not meet him, she would not. Even if she did meet him, Gu Lingyao would run away immediately. She didn't give Xiao Chen a chance to speak at all. He didn't know what was wrong with this girl. Xiao Chen naturally didn't expect that Gu Lingyao was like this only because of the girl's shyness. After all, no matter how eccentric Gu Lingyao was, she was still an inexperienced girl. Gu Lingyao deliberately avoided Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen was also embarrassed to take the initiative to look for her. For a time, the two of them strangely lived under the same roof. 3 days passed. On this day, after Xiao Chen finished a night of cultivation, he pushed open the door and was about to go to the courtyard to practice his swordsmanship. In less than a glance, Xiao Chen saw Gu Qi sitting in the courtyard and drinking tea. Why was this old man here? He was a little resentful. After all, this time, he was completely cheated by Gu Qi. Feeling unhappy, Xiao Chen didn't have a good expression. He casually bowed to Gu Qi and said, "Greetings, sect master." Naturally, he could see that Xiao Chen was resentful. Gu Qi didn't care. He smiled and said, "You little guy, why do you hate me so much? Don't forget, I'm now your father-in-law. I'm half your father. Do you understand?" He was completely shameless. At the same time, Xiao Chen didn't want to be outdone and said, "Sect master, it's too early to say that. Lingyao and I are only engaged and not married. If sect master insists on saying that I'm her father-in-law, then you have to add the word perspective in front of it." "Haha, little guy, you're quite resentful. Alright, I'm not here today to bicker with you. The 100 Refinements Valley will open in half a month, and the Sage Sect's selection will begin in 2 months. Half a month later, you and Lingyao will enter the 100 Refinements Valley. I saw that you only mastered one heaven-level martial skill during the last grand meeting of the two sections. Moreover, this heaven-level martial skill consumes a lot of energy. I'm here today to give you a treasure. Gu Qi didn't continue to argue with Xiao Chen and directly explained his purpose of coming. Hearing Gu Qi's words, Xiao Chen was slightly stunned. However, he quickly said with a displeased expression, "Give you a treasure? Sect Master, please don't make fun of me, okay? I don't want any treasures. I just hope that Sect Master will be magnanimous." Once bitten, twice shy. Xiao Chen was completely terrified by Gu Qi. Although Gu Qi didn't have any ill intentions towards him, this old guy was simply a person who wouldn't pay for it. In order to live a little longer, Xiao Chen decided to stay away from Gu Qi, this fox. Seeing Xiao Chen's expression as if he was facing a great enemy, even Gu Qi laughed bitterly to himself. Was there a need for this little guy to do that? Wasn't it just forcing you to marry my daughter? Furthermore, I didn't even feel that I was at a loss. I raised such a big girl and gave her to you just like that. Yet, you're still unhappy. Helplessly laughing bitterly, Gu Qi didn't say anything else. He took out a skill transfer jade from his storage ring and directly threw it to Xiao Chen. Then, he said, "This is a heaven-level lower-grade sword skill called Square Heaven Sword Shadow. Take it and cultivate." What an ungrateful brat. Chapter 523. Gu Qi came here mainly to teach Xiao Chen martial skills. During the two sects grand meet, Gu Qi had taught Xiao Chen the Tiger Stampede. Xiao Chen had no problems with movement martial skills, but in terms of attacking methods, Gu Qi felt that Xiao Chen paled in comparison. Although Xiao Chen had mastered quite a few martial skills, they were basically all Earth-class martial skills. He only had the Ganjiang Finger Sword as a Heaven-class martial skill. Moreover, the Ganjiang Finger Sword could only be used as a sure-kill move because it consumed too much of the body's spiritual energy. Although Earth-class martial skills were not bad, at Xiao Chen's level, the effects of Earth-class martial skills were not that obvious. They were all geniuses, and without a Heaven-class martial skill, it would be difficult to gain an advantage in battle. Therefore, Gu Qi taught Xiao Chen the Heaven-class low-grade martial skill, Square Heaven Sword Shadow. The Square Heaven Sword Shadow was not a martial skill of the Celestial Equal Sect, but Gu Qi's personal collection. He gave it to Xiao Chen without hesitation, which showed how much Gu Qi valued Xiao Chen. As soon as he finished speaking, Gu Qi left without waiting for Xiao Chen's reply. Holding the technique relaying jade in his hand, Xiao Chen did not know what to say. This cheap father-in-law was not that bad, at least he treated him well. Without hesitation, Xiao Chen went back to his room and used the technique, relaying jade, that recorded the Square Heaven Sword Shadow. A huge amount of information flowed into Xiao Chen's mind. This was the cultivation method of the Square Heaven Sword Shadow. It had to be said that as a Heaven-class martial skill, even if it was only a low-grade one, the power of the Square Heaven Sword Shadow was far from what an Earth-class martial skill could compare to. Moreover, the Square Heaven Sword Shadow and the Ganjiang Finger Sword could be said to complement each other. The Ganjiang Finger Sword focused on a sure-kill move, so when the finger was used, the spiritual energy in the body would be consumed by more than half. However, the Square Heaven Sword Shadow was different. In a fight, the Square Heaven Sword Shadow was obviously stronger than the Ganjiang Finger Sword. With both the Square Heaven Sword Shadow and the Ganjiang Finger Sword, Xiao Chen could use the Square Heaven Sword Shadow to fight with his enemies in the future, then find an opportunity to use the Ganjiang Finger Sword to kill him in one blow. It was very suitable for Xiao Chen's current situation. It was not hard to guess that this Sky Sword Shadow was probably a heaven-grade martial art technique that Gu Qi had specially chosen for Xiao Chen. It was also the type of heaven-grade martial art technique that Xiao Chen needed the most at the moment. After obtaining the Square Heaven Sword Shadow from Gu Qi, his father-in-law, there was still half a month before the opening of the 100 Refinements Valley. According to Xiao Chen's understanding, the 100 Refinements Valley would open for about a month, and then it would be the sage sex selection. Therefore, in the half a month before the opening of the 100 Refinements Valley, Xiao Chen planned to put all his attention on the square heaven sword shadow and strive to successfully cultivate it. Time passed slowly as he concentrated on cultivating in Gu Lingyao's residence. In this half a month, Gu Lingyao also mysteriously disappeared and did not show up. Xiao Chen was not worried about this, and he was even happy to be free. After all, the matter between him and Gu Lingyao was very awkward. Now, facing Gu Lingyao, Xiao Chen did not know what to say. He was not worried that Gu Lingyao would be in any danger. He guessed that Gu Lingyao must have been taken away by Gu Qi. In order to prepare for the 100 Refinements Valley and the sage sex selection, Gu Qi would naturally train Gu Lingyao personally. After all, she was his only daughter, and Gu Lingyao's talent was not bad. The two of them cultivated separately. At the same time, Gu Qi also sent over many elixirs for cultivation. Every other day, Gu Qi would even personally prepare a medicinal bath for Xiao Chen to make Xiao Chen's body stronger. Gu Qi valued Xiao Chen no less than his own daughter, Gu Lingyao. And it was with Gu Qi's help that Xiao Chen's cultivation was still rising steadily even though he put all his attention on cultivating the square heaven sword shadow. After 10 whole days, Xiao Chen had already grasped the basics of the square heaven sword shadow. He was only one step away from reaching the entry realm. The entry realm should not be underestimated. Although it was only the first realm of the martial technique, Xiao Chen was able to reach this step in 10 days. This was already embarrassing. Even Gu Qi could not help but be surprised at Xiao Chen's talent. This was because even when Gu Qi cultivated the square heaven sword shadow, he took 2 whole months to reach the entry realm. Xiao Chen, on the other hand, probably needed 2 or 3 days at most to break through to the entry realm. The difference between them was obvious. Xiao Chen's cultivation speed shocked Gu Qi. Of course, the better Xiao Chen performed, the more gratified Gu Qi would be. This was because only when Xiao Chen was strong enough, he could help in the future and protect Gu Lingyao. This was also Gu Qi's original intention for forcing the two of them to be engaged. As Gu Qi expected, after 2 days, Xiao Chen really succeeded in cultivating the square heaven sword shadow to the entry realm. The square heaven sword shadow was all about speed. There were no fancy moves. Every thrust of the sword was about speed. As the saying goes, speed is invincible in the world of martial arts. When one's speed reached the extreme, one thrust of the sword could transform into a sky full of sword shadows. It was impossible for the opponent to react in time and be injured. In the courtyard, Xiao Chen was constantly practicing the moves of the square heaven sword shadow. The scarlet heaven sword in his hand was constantly thrusting out. Countless sword shadows enveloped Xiao Chen's surroundings, as if it was a space of its own. One could imagine that if the opponent was trapped in this space, it would definitely be difficult for them to resist. Of course, these sword shadows were illusory because the speed had reached a certain limit. They were real and illusory, so people did not know how to guard against them. After a round of practice, Xiao Chen stopped his movements. His forehead was covered in fine beads of sweat. Xiao Chen let out a sigh and shook his head helplessly with a bitter smile. It seems like it's impossible to break through the square heaven sword shadow to the entry realm in a short period of time. Forget it, I'll see if there's a chance to break through in the 100 Refinements Valley. But this scarlet heaven sword is a little useless to me now. It would be difficult to break through the square heaven sword shadow in a short period of time. Besides, this scarlet heaven sword was not of much help to Xiao Chen now. As Xiao Chen's first treasured sword, the scarlet heaven sword had accompanied Xiao Chen through many trials and tribulations. As Xiao Chen improved, the scarlet heaven sword also gradually showed signs of fatigue. Besides, the scarlet heaven sword was obviously not the best choice in Xiao Chen's hands. The high-grade treasured sword, Ink Dragon, was now the most suitable sword for Xiao Chen. It was no longer difficult for Xiao Chen to display the power of the Ink Dragon sword like before. As his cultivation base continued to break through, Xiao Chen could now completely control the Ink Dragon sword. Compared to the Scarlet Heaven sword, the Ink Dragon sword was obviously more powerful. The two were simply incomparable. Xiao Chen looked at the Scarlet Heaven sword in his hand with a gentle expression. Since the Scarlet Heaven sword was already useless to him, he could totally let the Heaven's Path sword embryo devour it. However, Xiao Chen was reluctant to do so. After some thought, Xiao Chen finally gave up on the idea of letting the Heaven's Path sword embryo devour the Scarlet Heaven sword. Forget it. Although you can't help me much now, it's better for you to stay by my side. Chapter 524. As Xiao Chen's first treasured sword, Xiao Chen naturally had deep feelings for Scarlet Heaven sword. Therefore, even though it was already very difficult for Scarlet Heaven sword to keep up with his footsteps, Xiao Chen still wanted to keep Scarlet Heaven sword by his side. As he gently stroked Scarlet Heaven sword's blade, as if it could sense Xiao Chen's thoughts, Scarlet Heaven sword let out a series of sword cries. This sound seemed to be a sorrowful howl, but also seemed to be cheering. Sorrowful because Scarlet Heaven sword knew that it could no longer accompany Xiao Chen. Happy because even so, Xiao Chen still had no intention of giving up on it. Sensing the change in Scarlet Heaven sword, Xiao Chen smiled slightly. Don't worry, I, Xiao Chen, will never disgrace the sword in my hand. You are like this, and so is the Black Dragon sword. With that, Xiao Chen put Scarlet Heaven sword into his storage ring. At the same time, Gu Lingyao, who had disappeared for more than 10 days, finally returned. However, when he saw Xiao Chen at the door of the courtyard, Gu Lingyao blushed and ran back to his room without giving Xiao Chen a chance to speak. Originally, Xiao Chen wanted to greet him out of politeness, but when he saw this scene, he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. Ever since the engagement, Gu Lingyao seemed to have completely changed into a different person. Sometimes, Xiao Chen was simply a little confused. Shaking his head, he stopped thinking about Gu Lingyao. After all, Xiao Chen did not have a good way to deal with this matter. The time for the 100 Refinements Valley to open was getting closer and closer. During this period of time, all the young geniuses and prodigies of the Tianqi sect were also cultivating with all their might. In the Tianqi sect, if the Tiger's Stampede was the sect's ultimate technique, then the 100 Refinements Valley was the foundation of the Tianqi sect. The 100 Refinements Valley was brought here by Gu Qi. No one knew the origin of the 100 Refinements Valley, nor did they know what method Gu Qi had used to imprison the 100 Refinements Valley in an independent space within the Celestial Equal sect. It was precisely because of the 100 Refinements Valley that Gu Qi had established the Celestial Equal sect. Therefore, it was not an exaggeration to say that the 100 Refinements Valley was the foundation of the Celestial Equal sect. To the Celestial Equal sect, the importance of the 100 Refinements Valley was number one. At the same time, every single disciple of the Celestial Equal sect dreamed of entering the 100 Refinements Valley one day because they could obtain unimaginable benefits there. However, if they wanted to obtain benefits, they had to possess the corresponding strength. Therefore, there were only a few Celestial Equal sect disciples who could enter the 100 Refinements Valley. At the very least, they had to reach the level of a top prodigy to have the qualifications to enter the 100 Refinements Valley. All the prodigies were preparing to enter the 100 Refinements Valley. It was worth mentioning that Mu Feng had also been accepted as a disciple by Tian Guochuan in the past half a month. Tian Guochuan had personally guided Mu Feng. It was likely that Mu Feng was also going to enter the 100 Refinements Valley. Xiao Chen was not at ease with Mu Feng. Having a master like Tian Guochuan was naturally a good thing for Mu Feng. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. On this morning, as the sun rose, the clear sound of a bell rang in the Celestial Equal sect. Hearing the sound of the bell, all the disciples of the celestial equal sect revealed envious expressions. Everyone knew that the sound of the bell meant that the 100 Refinements Valley was about to open. The ordinary disciples were extremely envious. Those prodigies had been waiting for this day for a long time. Following the sound of the bell, figures soared into the sky from various parts of the celestial equal sect. They rushed towards the back mountain of the celestial equal sect at an extremely fast speed. The entrance of the 100 Refinements Valley was at the back mountain of the celestial equal sect. Like the other prodigies, Shao Chen was also preparing to rush to the back mountain. Just as Shao Chen left his room, Gu Lingyao also walked out of her room. The two of them bumped into each other and their eyes met. This time, Gu Lingyao did not run away. She only lowered her head with a red face, not daring to look at Shao Chen. Facing Gu Lingyao's silence, Shao Chen smiled helplessly. "Let's go together?" He could not pretend that he did not see it. Therefore, Shao Chen took the initiative to invite Gu Lingyao to the back mountain. Hearing Shao Chen's words, Gu Lingyao nodded slightly. Then, the two of them rushed towards the back mountain of the celestial equal sect together. The peak of the back mountain. Although it was called the peak, the entire back mountain seemed to have been cut in half by a sword. The peak was an extremely flat and wide square. This was the entrance to the 100 Refinements Valley. He cut a mountain peak in half with a single sword? What powerful strength! Arriving at the back mountain with Gu Lingyao and looking at the flat peak, Shao Chen, who was also a sword cultivator, naturally had a different feeling from the others. He secretly exclaimed in his heart. He was definitely a sword master. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to do this. He was a little surprised at who did this. As he sighed inwardly, he slowly landed on the peak of the back mountain. The appearance of Shao Chen and Gu Lingyao instantly attracted the attention of everyone present. Of course, when they looked at Shao Chen, their eyes were filled with uncontrollable anger. Because of Gu Lingyao, Shao Chen had already become the public enemy of all the male disciples of the celestial equal sect. He did not care about these angry gazes. He looked around and found that there were less than 120 people present. These people were probably the prodigies of the celestial equal sect who had entered the 100 Refinements Valley. Don't think that these 100 people were too few. One had to know that back in the heavenly Qin continent, all the prodigies, including the king of prodigies, only had a little more than 100 people. The celestial equal sect was only a sect, but the number of prodigies of the celestial equal sect was already no less than the heavenly Qin continent. In comparison, one would not feel that these 100 people were too few. Just as Shao Chen was sizing up the crowd, Mu Feng quickly ran to Shao Chen and said with a worried expression, "Brother Shao Chen, you have to be careful when you enter the 100 Refinements Valley later. I heard them say that they will definitely teach you a lesson when they enter the 100 Refinements Valley." They planned to take revenge on him in the 100 Refinements Valley. Hearing Mu Feng's words, Shao Chen revealed a sneer on his face as a cold glint flashed in his eyes. Originally, he did not plan to lower himself to their level. However, since these disciples wanted to provoke him first, Shao Chen naturally would not allow himself to be captured without a fight. Then, let's see who will teach who a lesson in the end. Shao Chen was not worried that they would teach him a lesson in the 100 Refinements Valley. In the end, it was still unknown who would teach who a lesson in the end. Nodding to Mu Feng, Shao Chen smiled and said, "It's fine. I want to see how these guys will teach me a lesson." Just as Shao Chen and Mu Feng were talking, Gu Qi, Tian Guochuan, and more than 10 elders appeared on the top of the mountain. Standing in front of everyone, Gu Qi scanned the crowd and nodded to Tian Guochuan. Seeing this, Tian Guochuan took a step forward, circulated the spiritual energy in his body, and shouted loudly, "The 100 Refinements Valley is open. The rules are the same as before. It will be open for a month. I hope that this time, you will be able to create a new record in the 100 Refinements Valley and obtain more benefits to prepare for the upcoming Sage Sect selection. Chapter 525. Tian Guochuan shouted loudly. More than 100 prodigious disciples looked at Tian Guochuan expectantly. They were finally going to open the first secret realm of the Celestial Equal Sect, the 100 Refinements Valley. As his voice faded, Tian Guochuan respectfully retreated behind Gu Qi. Immediately, Gu Qi took out an ancient black token from his storage ring and casually tossed the token high into the air. After which, he formed a seal with both of his hands. Immediately, a black light erupted from the black token. Very quickly, within a short span of 10 breaths, the token turned into a black metal door. The black iron gate was very tall, at least 100 meters tall. At the same time, a heavy feeling surged out, causing many of the supreme disciples to involuntarily retreat. This aura and pressure. Even Xiaochen was surprised. The black iron gate slowly opened with a muffled bang. At the same time, Gu Qi said slowly, "Go in. How much you can get will depend on your own abilities." The prodigious disciples didn't hesitate and immediately rushed into the black iron gate. This was the entrance to the 100 Refinements Valley. However, before everyone entered the 100 Refinements Valley, many of them glanced at Xiao Qin with an unfriendly expression when they passed by him. The meaning revealed in their eyes was very clear. These fellows were just as Mu Feng had said. They wanted to deal with him in the 100 Refinements Valley. In the outside world, Xiao Qin was Gu Qi's son-in-law in name. If they wanted to cause trouble for Xiao Qin, they had to consider Gu Qi's attitude. In addition, their masters had repeatedly warned them not to provoke Xiao Qin. Therefore, many of them had been suppressing their anger for the past half a month. Now that they were in the 100 Refinements Valley, without the pressure of Gu Qi and the other elders, they naturally became active. They wanted to teach Xiao Qin a lesson. Naturally, they also knew that Xiao Qin and Gu Lingyao were already engaged. What was done could not be undone. However, this did not stop the jealousy in their hearts. Their thoughts were actually very simple. They did not expect to change anything. They only wanted to beat Xiao Qin up to vent the anger in their hearts, or rather, the jealousy in their hearts. Xiao Qin didn't care about the glares of the prodigious disciples. Since they wanted to make trouble for him, Xiao Qin didn't mind teaching them a lesson. Together with Mu Feng, Xiao Qin entered the 100 Refinements Valley unhurriedly. As for Gu Lingyao, she naturally did not follow Xiao Qin. Instead, she entered the 100 Refinements Valley first with a red face. Very soon, the 100 over prodigious disciples all entered the 100 Refinements Valley. Then, the black metal door closed with a bang. It would only open again a month later. The black metal door stood on the mountain peak. Tian Guochuan revealed a smile as he looked at the tightly shut metal door. Sect leader, it seems that these little fellows still plan to cause trouble for Xiao Qin. You betrothed Lingyao to Xiao Qin. This has caused this little fellow to become the target of public criticism. Tian Guochuan wasn't the only one who knew that many prodigious disciples wanted to cause trouble for Xiao Qin. All the elders present, including Gu Qi, knew that the source of all this was naturally the engagement between Xiao Qin and Gu Lingyao. Gu Qi smiled indifferently when he heard Tian Guochuan's words. These little brats are all arrogant. Since that's the case, it's good to let Xiao Qin teach them a lesson. He wasn't worried about Xiao Qin at all. In Gu Qi's opinion, these little brats were no match for Xiao Qin. An elder laughed when he heard this. Sect leader seems to think highly of Xiao Qin. However, those who entered the 100 Refinements Valley this time are all prodigious disciples. Can Xiao Qin handle their joint attack? Haha, if the son-in-law that I fancy can't even deal with these little brats, then I can only say that I have misjudged him. In this way, Xiao Qin is likely not worthy of my precious daughter. Let's go. The result will naturally be known in a month. The elders didn't think highly of Xiao Qin. After all, no matter how strong Xiao Qin's combat strength was, he would be outnumbered in the face of over 100 prodigious disciples. However, Gu Qi laughed loudly in response. Then, he took the lead and disappeared from the back mountain without any worry. Just as Gu Qi had said, the result would naturally be known in a month's time. Gu Qi had absolute confidence in Xiao Chen. Tian Guochuan and the other elders exchanged glances with each other when they saw this. After which, they also left one after another. They didn't know where Xiao Chen's confidence came from in the face of over 100 prodigious disciples. However, it was useless to think too much about it. Everyone would know the answer in a month's time. After Gu Qi and the other elders left the back mountain, Xiao Chen and the others entered the 100 Refinements Valley through the Black Iron Gate. This was Xiao Chen's second time entering such an independent small space. The first time was when he participated in the Five Elements Tao Palace on the heavenly Chen continent. What a rich power of laws! As soon as they entered the 100 Refinements Valley, the entrance to a valley appeared in front of them. The valley wasn't big, but it was very deep. Standing outside, they couldn't see the environment inside at all. It was pitch black inside. However, Xiao Chen was more concerned about the power of laws in the valley. Although Xiao Chen was unfamiliar with the power of laws, he had clearly sensed it before. However, the power of laws was still too far away for the current Xiao Chen. After all, it was something that only a half-saint could master. The entire 100 Refinements Valley was filled with the power of laws. It was so rich that it made people blush with shame. After looking around, Xiao Chen's gaze finally fell on the entrance to the valley in front of him. He softly muttered to himself, "Rumor has it that the 100 Refinements Valley has 36 layers of heavens. Passing through each layer will allow one to undergo a transformation. When one reaches the final 36 layers, it is said that one will obtain indescribable benefit. Unfortunately, no one has been able to reach the 36th layer since the founding of the Celestial Equal Sect." Xiao Chen naturally had some understanding of the 100 Refinements Valley. There were 36 layers of heavens in the 100 Refinements Valley. Everyone would pass through the first layer one after another. Passing through each layer would allow one to obtain benefit. At this moment, Xiao Chen and the others were standing at the entrance to the 100 Refinements Valley. Entering the valley was the first layer of heavens. Only after passing through the first layer of heavens could one continue to advance. The rules were very simple, but the difficulty couldn't be underestimated. Every time the 100 Refinements Valley opened, most people basically couldn't even pass through the first 10 layers of heavens. While Xiao Chen was sizing up the entrance to the 36th layer of heavens in front of him, the surrounding prodigy disciples also gathered around Xiao Chen with sneers on their faces. Obviously, they wanted to make a move. Before passing through, these guys planned to teach Xiao Chen a lesson. A faint sneer appeared on Xiao Chen's face when he sensed the actions of these prodigy disciples. However, before he could say anything, Gu Lingyao, who had been hiding from him all this while, was the first to stand up and yell angrily. "What are you trying to do? All of you, scram to the side." Chapter 526. Gu Lingyao had long known that these fellows harbored ill intentions towards Xiao Chen. Although Gu Lingyao had been deliberately avoiding Xiao Chen during this period of time, this did not mean that she hated Xiao Chen. The reason why Gu Lingyao could avoid Xiao Chen was entirely due to the shyness in her heart. Seeing that these fellows wanted to harm Xiao Chen, Gu Lingyao naturally stood out without hesitation and blocked in front of Xiao Chen as she shouted angrily. In the face of Gu Lingyao's rebuke, the prodigy disciples surrounding Xiao Chen had no intention of moving aside. Subsequently, Chao He slowly walked out from the crowd. Currently, the Tianqi sect only had a total of 3 prodigy kings, including Xiao Chen. One was Gu Lingyao and the other was Chao He. Xiao Chen was naturally no stranger to her. After all, during the two sects' grand meeting, Xiao Chen had used Wang Huan's identity and the two of them had interacted quite a bit. However, Xiao Chen was now using his real identity, so Chao He naturally would not have thought that Xiao Chen was Wang Huan. Chao He slowly walked in front of Gu Lingyao and said calmly, "Junior sister Lingyao, everyone has some anger towards Xiao Chen in their hearts. It's not good to not let them vent their anger. I think you shouldn't interfere in this matter." "Chao He, what did you say? Say it again if you dare." Gu Lingyao angrily glared at Chao He. "Sigh, junior sister Lingyao, although I admit that I'm not as strong as you, it's not impossible for me to hold you back. Come, let me see if you've improved during this period of time." In the face of Gu Lingyao's angry rebuke, Chao He knew that it was impossible to persuade her. As such, she could only fight. Chao He holding Gu Lingyao back was something that everyone had long planned. Of course, not all of the prodigy disciples present wanted to teach Xiao Chen a lesson. The female disciples clearly had no intention of interfering. After all, Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao were engaged. It was nothing to them, so they would not be jealous. On the contrary, the few female disciples were all looking curiously at Xiao Chen. Some of them were even whispering amongst themselves, "I'm afraid that Xiao Chen is in trouble today." "I don't think so. Junior sister, didn't you notice that Xiao Chen has been extremely calm from the beginning? It's obvious that he's not worried about what's going to happen next." "Lingyao, I think. And I think that Xiao Chen is quite handsome. If it wasn't for the Lingyao world. You little girl, you're really a love-struck fool." The female disciples did not have any hostility towards Xiao Chen. On the contrary, they were very curious. However, Xiao Chen did not care about this. At this moment, Gu Lingyao and Chao He were already engaged in a fierce battle. Chao He was keeping Gu Lingyao busy in the battle, so it was obvious that Gu Lingyao was having a hard time dealing with Chao He. At the same time, Chao He kept luring Gu Lingyao further away, leaving space for Xiao Chen and the other disciples. Seeing that Gu Lingyao was no longer protecting them, a prodigy disciple finally opened his mouth and said, "Xiao Chen, we don't want to do anything to you. However, junior sister Lingyao is the goddess in our hearts. Since you're engaged to her, we'll naturally be jealous. So, we'll teach you a lesson today to vent our anger. We won't find trouble with you in the future." He was very direct and spoke his mind without hiding anything. Hearing the prodigy disciple's words, Xiao Chen was secretly amused. Of course, he could feel that these guys did not have any killing intent towards him. In response, Xiao Chen smiled and said, "If that's the case, I'll go easy on you." After saying that, Xiao Chen did not wait for the others to reply. He said to Mu Feng, who was standing beside him, "Back off a little." After saying that, Xiao Chen's feet moved and he directly executed the ferocious tiger stampede. He immediately executed the ferocious tiger stampede. Seeing this, the faces of the surrounding disciples changed slightly. However, before they could recover from their shock, Xiao Chen had already rushed in front of the prodigy disciple who had just spoken. He fiercely threw a punch, which heavily landed on the disciple's face. 2 teeth flew out with fresh blood. With a scream and a punch, the disciple was sent flying by Xiao Chen. After sending one person flying, Xiao Chen did not stop and directly rushed into the crowd. For a moment, the crowd was filled with screams. After executing the ferocious tiger stampede, Xiao Chen's speed could be said to have been raised to the extreme. Ever since he obtained the ferocious tiger stampede during the 2-sex grand meet, Xiao Chen had also cultivated the ferocious tiger stampede to the proficient realm. Therefore, in terms of speed, it was naturally much faster than when he was at the 2-sex grand meet. His figure was like a ghost as he shuttled through the crowd. Wherever Xiao Chen passed, people would be thrown off their feet. What a joke! During this period of time, Xiao Chen had been soaking in a medicinal bath every other day under Guqi's special care. His physical body had been raised to an extremely terrifying level. It was not an exaggeration to say that compared to half a month ago, Xiao Chen's physical strength had at least doubled. At the same time, No one knew whether it was because of the medicinal baths that Gu Qi had prepared, but the Dragon Clan's blood essence in Xiao Chen's body was also constantly strengthening his body. With these two factors working together, Xiao Chen was now a human-shaped demonic beast. His physical strength was not any weaker than that of a demonic beast. His strength had increased by a lot. Therefore, when facing these top prodigies and peerless prodigies, Xiao Chen did not even need to use his sword. He only used his fists to beat these guys until they could not fight back. There were no superb martial arts technique. It was just like a brawl between hooligans. His fists were thrown out without any pattern. However, every punch was difficult for these prodigies to block. At first, these prodigies still joined forces to resist. However, they soon realized that their resistance was a joke in front of Xiao Chen. His terrifying physical body was like a tank that crushed over. This was what the saying, "one force can break 10,000 moves" meant. He did not kill these disciples. After all, they had no intention to kill him. Moreover, they were all disciples of the Tianqi sect. Soon, many of these people would follow him to participate in the sage sect's selection. At the same time, now was the beginning of the 100 Refinements Valley. If he crippled these people, it would be equivalent to cutting off their opportunity. It would not be kind to them. However, even though Xiao Chen was being merciful, the pain was still undeniable. Furthermore, Xiao Chen was very particular about his technique. He would only hurt the skin and flesh without harming the core. However, the pain was unbearable for these genius disciples. In the beginning, the crowd was still unyielding. However, in less than half an hour, they began to beg for mercy. First of all, the people who were beaten up by Xiao Chen were crying for their parent. "Senior brother Xiao Chen, we were wrong. We won't dare to do it again. Don't hit us. Really, don't hit us. Ouch, my eyes. Senior brother Xiao Chen, don't hit me. Big brother Xiao Chen, I was wrong. My nose is broken. It's really broken. Brother, don't hit me. Don't hit me. This is my lifeblood. You can't kick it. Brother." Chapter 527. It had only been an hour since Xiao Chen's arrival, and those geniuses who had wanted to teach Xiao Chen a lesson had already begun to beg for mercy. The disciples who were beaten up by Xiao Chen were all lying on the ground and wailing. Although Xiao Chen did not kill them and their injuries were not serious, the intense pain on their bodies was real. Moreover, Xiao Chen was extremely particular when he attacked. He controlled the strength of every move. He did not seriously injure these disciples, but the pain was unbearable. The result was completely different from everyone's expectations. Facing Xiao Chen alone, these prodigy disciples did not have the ability to resist at all. Hearing everyone's wailing and begging for mercy, Xiao Chen stopped what he was doing and said with a faint smile on his face, "Do you still want to teach me a lesson? Senior brother Xiao Chen, we won't dare to do it again. We won't dare to do it again. We will follow your lead in the future. We won't dare to do anything if you order us around." Hearing Xiao Chen's words, the prodigy disciple lying at Xiao Chen's feet immediately replied, afraid that he would be beaten up again by Xiao Chen if he answered too slowly. "Yes, yes. Senior brother Xiao Chen, no, no, no. Big brother Xiao Chen, we will listen to you in the future. We will do whatever you ask us to do." As the disciple finished speaking, the other prodigy disciples also echoed. They were completely scared. Of course, this was also because there was no enmity between them, so there was no need to risk their lives. Moreover, Xiao Chen was Gu Qi's prospective son-in-law, so these disciples did not dare to offend Xiao Chen too much. Otherwise, their days in the Tianqi sect would probably not be good in the future. Similarly, Xiao Chen did not kill these prodigy disciples. Firstly, there was no deep enmity. Secondly, it was now the opening period of the 100 Refinements Valley. There was only a month's time. If Xiao Chen crippled these people, it would be equivalent to cutting off their fortune this time. In the world of martial arts, stealing another's fortune was a deep enmity. Moreover, everyone was a disciple of the Tianqi sect, so Xiao Chen did not have to do this at all. Of course, the premise of all this was that these prodigy disciples did not have any killing intent towards him. From the beginning to the end, these people only wanted to teach him a lesson. Therefore, Xiao Chen did this. Dozens of prodigy disciples were lying on the ground. As for the few disciples who were not beaten up by Xiao Chen, they all retreated far away with fear in their eyes. Xiao Chen was simply too powerful. He was simply a monster. He was facing over 100 genius disciples all by himself, yet he was able to crush them all. That's right, it was crushing. He had used the simplest and most direct method to crush all of them. Chao He, who was fighting fiercely with Gu Lingyao, did not expect the battle to end so quickly. His expression changed slightly. The outcome was completely different from what he had imagined. The battle was over. Chao He naturally had no reason to continue fighting with Gu Lingyao. Moreover, Chao He's combat strength was not as good as Gu Lingyao's. If they continued fighting, Chao He would definitely lose. With the intention to retreat, Chao He took the initiative to retreat. However, just as he widened the gap between him and Gu Lingyao, Xiao Chen suddenly appeared behind Chao He with a harmless smile on his face. "Senior brother Chao He, you see, the others have been beaten up by me. If I don't beat you up, the anger in my chest will really be hard to calm down." His voice was very calm, and there was no trace of anger in it. However, as soon as Xiao Chen's voice fell, Xiao Chen kicked Chao He's lower body. Not only that, after kicking Chao He's lower body, Xiao Chen actually hooked it with force. They were standing behind Chao He, so when Xiao Chen hooked it, everyone felt as if they could hear the sound of eggs breaking. Chao He's face instantly turned the color of pig liver. They were absolutely terrified. As they looked at Chao He, the surrounding geniuses all rejoiced in their hearts. Compared to Chao He, they only felt that they were too lucky. At least, Xiao Chen did not give them such a kick. Will senior brother Chao He be able to do it in the future? I don't know. Looking at Chao He in a daze, many disciples whispered among themselves. Their voices were filled with sympathy, as if they could understand Chao He's current pain. This kick was absolutely painful, but Chao He held back and didn't cry out. It could be seen that this guy's endurance wasn't weak. However, just when everyone thought that it was over, Gu Lingyao came to Chao He's side and ruthlessly kicked Chao He's lower body again. 2 consecutive kicks landed on the same spot, which was the most vulnerable part of a man's body. Chao He endured the first kick, but the second time, he immediately screamed. My junior sister Lingyao, you who would have thought that Gu Lingyao would be so vicious?" Hearing Chao He's scream, Gu Lingyao said unhappily, "Who told you to stop this young lady? This kick is the price this young lady has to pay for forgiving you." Hearing Gu Lingyao's words, Chao He's head tilted and he fainted. But at the last moment Chao He really wanted to shout, "This price is too high." Gu Lingyao's kick was even more vicious than Xiao Chen's. The surrounding disciples all sucked in a breath of cold air. Even Xiao Chen looked at Gu Lingyao with a strange expression, secretly feeling sorry for Chao He. "I hope this guy can pull through." Sigh. He didn't know if Chao He would still be able to do that in the future after these 2 kicks. Facing Xiao Chen's gaze, the coldness on Gu Lingyao's face quickly dissipated and was replaced by a shy look. Her pretty face blushed, and without waiting for Xiao Chen to say anything, Gu Lingyao quickly ran over. "Aya, why did I stand out to help him just now? Will he think that I like him?" Gu Lingyao's imagination ran wild as she ran. Xiao Chen didn't treat Gu Lingyao with respect at all. Seeing her leave, Xiao Chen could only helplessly sigh. Then, he swept a glance at the prodigious disciples present and said calmly, "Has the anger in your hearts subsided now?" Hearing Xiao Chen's words, the prodigious disciples naturally weren't idiots. They knew what he meant and immediately nodded, respectfully replying like chickens pecking at rice. It's gone, it's gone." Thank you, Senior Brother Xiaoqin, for showing mercy. Senior Brother Xiaoqin, what are you saying? How could we be angry? Senior Brother, on the other hand, your anger has subsided, right? If not, we can continue to practice martial arts for Senior Brother. We only hope that Senior Brother's anger will vanish. That will be enough for us. They all nodded repeatedly, and some even said such words. Hearing these words, Xiao Chen was stunned. He thought to himself, what kind of genius is this? How could you say such words? Chapter 528. He was definitely a genius. Xiao Chen was no longer angry after hearing the crowd's response. How could he still be angry when faced with such a person who dared to say such things? He nodded slightly and believed that no one would dare to find trouble with him in the future. After all, even a genius disciple had been dealt with by him. As long as the other disciples weren't fools, he believed that they would know what to do. Xiao Chen didn't say anything else. After this farce, he finally had the time to properly size up the entrance of the 100 Refinements Valley. Xiao Chen, brother. At this moment, Mu Feng also came to Xiao Chen's side and called out with a look of admiration. Upon hearing Mu Feng's words, Xiao Chen smiled and said, "Let's go. It's time to enter the 100 Refinements Valley." After saying that, Xiao Chen took the lead and walked into the 100 Refinements Valley while Mu Feng followed closely behind. Watching Xiao Chen's back until Xiao Chen disappeared into the valley's entrance, the numerous genius disciples present all secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Then, they looked at the unconscious Chao He and revealed a look of sympathy. Chao He was simply too pitiful, especially after Gu Lingyao's kick. Just thinking about it made their hair stand on end. Several Heaven's Pride disciples who had a good relationship with Chao He came to Chao He's side and fed him some healing pills. Then, they checked his body. After confirming that there were no problems, these people secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Chao He's injuries were all superficial. It was likely that she would wake up soon. Moreover, she could continue to roam the 100 Refinement Valley. While everyone was helping Chao He, Xiao Chen and Mu Feng had already entered the 100 Refinements Valley and arrived at the first heaven. As soon as Xiao Chen entered the 100 Refinements Valley, he felt that he was enveloped by an irresistible power of laws. Then, the scene before his eyes changed. When Xiao Chen returned to his senses again, Mu Feng was no longer there. In front of him was a tall black wall that blocked Xiao Chen's path. Realizing that Mu Feng had disappeared, Xiao Chen looked at the tall black wall in front of him and muttered softly to himself, "It's really mysterious. Will we be separated after entering the 100 Refinements Valley?" If one wanted to obtain benefits in the 100 Refinements Valley, one had to continuously pass through the levels. There were 36 levels in the entire 100 Refinements Valley. The higher the level, the better the rewards. Moreover, in order to ensure that everyone passed through the trials with their own strength, once they entered the 100 Refinements Valley, everyone would be separated and unable to help each other. Looking at the high wall in front of him, Xiao Chen quickly received a message in his mind. It was the requirement to pass the first heaven. With a slight smile on his face, Xiao Chen said faintly, "The first heaven tests one's strength? Interesting." According to the information he had received, the first heaven was a test of strength. As long as he could destroy the black wall in front of him, he would be able to move on to the second heaven. Clenching his fists tightly, Xiao Chen threw a probing punch. In the face of this punch, the black wall did not collapse. It only shook slightly. The black wall was indeed extremely hard. However, after the initial test, Xiao Chen believed that it would not be difficult for him to destroy the black wall with his own strength. Then, Xiao Chen clenched his fists tightly and threw a punch. The black wall began to shake violently. At the same time, Xiao Chen did not have the slightest intention of stopping. He continued to throw several punches. In the end, when Xiao Chen's fifth punch landed, the black wall collapsed with a bang. After the black wall collapsed, Xiao Chen was once again enveloped by the power of the laws. However, this time, in addition to the power of the laws, Xiao Qin also felt an extremely dense spiritual power. This spiritual power was different from ordinary spiritual power. It was as if it had been refined by someone and then forcibly poured into his body. Therefore, in the face of this spiritual power, Xiao Qin did not need to refine it at all. It was very easy for him to absorb it for his own use. At the same time, as this spiritual power continued to pour into his body, Xiao Qin's cultivation also continued to improve. After a quarter of an hour, the spiritual power disappeared, and the power of the laws also slowly dissipated. The scene in front of Xiao Qin began to change again. After successfully making it through the first layer of heaven and regaining his senses, Xiao Qin appeared in the valley. A light gate appeared in front of him again. That was probably the entrance to the second layer of heaven. It seems that every time I break through a heaven, I have time to rest. This is not bad. At least I can control the time. Looking at the entrance to the second heaven in front of him, Xiao Qin said with a chuckle, "There was no mandatory requirement for you to break through. You could completely control the time. In this way, after breaking through a heaven, you would have enough time to adjust your state." This was very good. Sitting cross-legged on the ground, Xiao Qin closed his eyes and adjusted his breathing for about a quarter of an hour. During this time, Mu Feng, Gu Lingyao, and other prodigious disciples also broke through the first heaven one after another and appeared in front of Xiao Qin. Everyone also chose to close their eyes and adjust their breathing like Xiao Qin. After a quarter of an hour, Xiao Qin opened his eyes. In this valley, there were already dozens of prodigious disciples gathered. It was obvious that everyone had also broken through the first heaven. The test of the first heaven should not be difficult, so these prodigious disciples were able to break through. However, the further they went, the more difficult it would be. The gap between the prodigious disciples would slowly widen. Glancing at Mu Feng and Gu Lingyao, Xiao Qin saw that they were still adjusting their breathing with their eyes closed. Seeing that they were still adjusting their breathing, Xiao Qin did not disturb them. He got up and walked towards the second heaven. Just like before, after Xiao Qin entered the second heaven, the power of law enveloped Xiao Qin. The surrounding environment began to change constantly. In the end, Xiao Qin appeared in a dense forest. There were dense trees all around. Soon, the requirements of the second heaven test were transmitted to Xiao Qin's mind. The test of the second heaven was speed. After entering the test, there would be countless flying swords shooting from all directions in this dense forest. The examinee could not destroy these flying swords. They could only use their speed to dodge them. At the same time, they would have 3 chances to be hit by the flying swords. Once they were hit by the flying swords 3 times, it would be considered a failure. They would be forcefully sent back to the second heaven, back to the valley from before. Of course, because they were allowed to be hit 3 times, the final reward was different. If they were not hit even once, the reward would naturally be the highest. Every time they were hit, the reward would be reduced by 1 point. After understanding the requirements of the second heaven test, Xiao Qin exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. Immediately, he heard the sound of wind breaking. Then, a flying sword came from the front towards Xiao Qin like lightning. The speed of the flying sword was very fast. At the same time, the angle was very tricky. In this regard, Xiao Qin did not hesitate. He immediately used the stampede of the tiger. With a sidestep, he skillfully dodged the attack of the flying sword. Chapter 529. It was a single flying sword that came from the front. Naturally, it was not difficult for Xiao Qin to dodge it. However, it was obvious that the assessment in the 100 Refinements Valley would not be so simple. As expected, after Xiao Qin easily dodged the first flying sword, 2 more flying swords shot out from the left and right at the same time. The difficulty kept increasing. After just 15 minutes, the number of flying swords that Xiao Qin faced each time would not be less than a dozen. Dozens of flying swords were constantly shooting towards him from all directions. He did not know when the assessment would end, so Xiao Chun did not dare to be careless. As the number of flying swords increased, it was naturally harder to successfully dodge them. At the same time, as time passed, there would be a few breaths of time after each round of flying sword attacks ended. However, there was no longer a gap now. Xiao Chun used the stampede of the ferocious tiger to evade the attack. After an unknown amount of time, Xiao Chun finally evaded the last flying sword. The power of laws shrouded him again, and at the same time, the pure spiritual power from before reappeared. Compared to the first level of heaven, the rewards of the second level of heaven were obviously more generous. The amount of pure spiritual energy was much more. After passing through 2 levels of heaven in a row, Xiao Chun passed through the second level of heaven and continued to advance into the depths of the valley. After leaving the second level of heaven, Xiao Chun appeared in the valley. In front of him was the light door that led to the third level of heaven. After receiving 2 rewards, he could clearly feel that his cultivation was very close to breaking through again. A hint of excitement flashed in his eyes as he spoke. The rewards of the 100 Refinements Valley are really worthy of their reputation. No wonder the disciples of the Celestial Equal Sect yearn for it so much. As long as you can pass the level here, breaking through your cultivation is not difficult at all. With the existence of the mysterious pure spiritual energy, I will definitely be able to break through to the lesser perfection Tao querying realm after a few more rounds. It is even possible for me to break through consecutively within this month. The 100 Refinements Valley was indeed worthy of the title of the top secret realm of the Celestial Equal Sect. There was a trace of excitement in his heart. He was about to break through. Now, Xiao Chen's cultivation was at the greater perfection Tao querying realm. If he could break through again, he would be at the lesser perfection Tao querying realm. Moreover, in Xiao Chen's heart, as long as he could pass all the levels successfully, the lesser perfection Tao querying realm would not be the end. A total of 36 levels was enough for Xiao Chen's cultivation to break through to the greater perfection Tao querying realm. Of course, all of this was on the premise that Xiao Chen could break through to the greater perfection Tao querying realm. This time, Xiao Chen only rested for 100 breaths. Because he felt that he was about to make a breakthrough, Xiao Chen also increased the speed of his breakthrough. He wanted to make a breakthrough as soon as possible. After all, time was limited. The 100 Refinements Valley would only be open for a month. After 100 breaths, no one else had passed through the second heaven, including Gu Lingyao and Chao He. Without waiting for the rest, Xiao Chen stepped into the third heaven. The third heaven was a test of soul power. For Xiao Chen, this was not difficult at all. Xiao Chen passed the test of the third heaven easily. After receiving another infusion of spiritual power, Xiao Chen's cultivation soared again. He was one step closer to breaking through to the lesser perfection Tao querying realm. After leaving the third heaven, Xiao Chen did not stop this time. Xiao Chen passed the test of soul power easily. Hence, he did not need to stop and rest. He immediately began the test of the fourth heaven. The fourth heaven was a test of battle awareness. Once he entered, Xiao Chen appeared in a dark secret room. At the same time, the spiritual power, physical strength, and soul power in his body were completely confined. At this moment, Xiao Chen was no different from an ordinary person. In addition to the confinement of spiritual power, physical strength, and other warriors' strength, a row of various weapons appeared in front of Xiao Chen. There were spears, sabers, axes, boxing gloves, and of course, long swords. However, these weapons were the most ordinary weapons. Xiao Chen even suspected that these weapons were transformed by the 100 Refinements Valley. After all, the 100 Refinements Valley was too mysterious. Xiao Chen could not understand it. He could only follow the 100 Refinements Valley's requirements to pass the test. With the appearance of these weapons, the test requirements of the fourth heaven were also passed to Xiao Chen. A test of battle awareness? The fourth heaven was a test of a warrior's battle awareness. After knowing this, Xiao Chen naturally chose the long sword without any hesitation. He was a sword cultivator. Besides the sword, Xiao Chen knew nothing about other weapons. Moreover, besides the sword, Xiao Chen was not interested in other weapons. With the long sword in hand, the other weapons quickly disappeared. Then, a stone golem appeared out of thin air in front of Xiao Chen. This stone golem did not have a terrifying aura, and there was nothing different about it. Without any explanation, the stone golem directly attacked Xiao Chen as soon as it appeared. In response, Xiao Chen slashed out with his sword. With a crisp sound, the stone golem took Xiao Chen's sword head-on, but it was unharmed. It's useless. The long sword could not hurt the stone golem at all. Xiao Chen was stunned, but he quickly realized that the fourth heaven was a test of battle awareness. In other words, the stone golem must have a weakness. Only by hitting its weakness could he defeat it. He had to find its weakness. Of course, since it was its weakness, the stone golem would definitely defend tightly. This would test the warrior's battle awareness. How to find the enemy's weakness and think of a way to defeat it at the same time. It was obviously impossible to cause any damage to the stone golem with an ordinary long sword. Only by finding its weakness could he defeat the stone golem. Thinking of this, Xiao Chen no longer chose to attack blindly. Instead, he dodged around. Soon, Xiao Chen found the stone golem's weakness at the back of its waist. He smiled slightly and said, "It hit it quite well." After finding its weakness, the next step was to defeat it. While dodging the stone golem's attacks, Xiao Chen waited for an opportunity. Soon, Xiao Chen seized the gap in the stone golem's attack and stabbed out. The long sword hit the stone golem's back and defeated it directly. After defeating the first stone golem, the test was not over. After the first stone golem fell, 2 more stone golems appeared at the same time. After a bloody battle, Xiao Chen defeated 4 rounds of stone golems before he passed the 4th test. The first round had 1 stone golem, the second round had 2, the third round had 3, and the 4th round had 4. Moreover, the weaknesses of these stone golems were different. However, after a fierce battle, Xiao Chen finally succeeded. At the same time, the reward for the 4th heaven fell from the sky. With the infusion of pure spiritual power, Xiao Chen's cultivation level broke through with a muffled sound. He finally broke through. After successfully passing the 4th heaven, Xiao Chen's cultivation level also broke through from the Great Success Tao-Seeking Realm to the Minor Perfection Tao-Seeking Realm. Chapter 530. The breakthrough in his cultivation made Xiao Chen overjoyed. The 100 Refinements Valley was really amazing. This was the first time in Xiao Chen's life that he had made a breakthrough so easily. He did not feel any obstruction at all. It was as easy as eating and drinking water for him to make a breakthrough in his cultivation. He really didn't know where Gu Qi had obtained such a cultivation secret realm like the 100 Refinements Valley. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that even the 5 Elements Palace, one of the 5 great divine sites of the heavenly Qin continent, couldn't compare to the 100 Refinements Valley. Of course, Xiao Chen had only been to the 5 Elements Palace. As for the other 4 great divine sites, Xiao Chen hadn't been there yet. However, if he could stop the large-scale attack of the demonic cultivators this time, he would definitely have the opportunity to enter the other 4 great divine sites in the future. After another quarter of an hour, the pure and mysterious spiritual power disappeared along with the power of law. Xiao Chen reappeared in the valley, but he had taken another step forward. He had successfully passed the 4th heaven. Among all the people who had entered the 100 Refinements Valley, Xiao Chen was now the fastest. As for those who were chasing after Xiao Chen, it was naturally Gu Lingyao and Chao He. However, Chao He was 1 step slower than Gu Lingyao. At this moment, Gu Lingyao had already begun to pass the 4th heaven, while Chao He had only passed the 3rd heaven and had yet to enter the 4th heaven. His cultivation had successfully broken through, and with the help of the mysterious spiritual power, Xiao Chen's aura wasn't the slightest bit shaky because he had just broken through. Therefore, he didn't need to rest at all. Xiao Chen directly entered the fifth heaven. The difficulty of the first fourth heaven was increasing. However, compared to the first heaven, the difficulty of the fourth heaven was at least twice as high. He didn't know what the test of the fifth heaven was. Regarding this, Xiao Chen faintly had a trace of expectation in his heart. Soon, Xiao Chen entered the fifth layer of heaven. The layout of the fifth layer of heaven was very simple. It was just an arena, and Xiao Chen appeared directly on the arena. At the same time, a dark shadow of a human figure appeared in front of Xiao Chen. Its face could not be seen clearly, as it was like a shadow. With the appearance of this black figure, the test requirements of the fifth heaven quickly appeared in Xiao Chen's mind. The requirement of the fifth heaven was to defeat the black figure in front of him. However, there were many restrictions. First of all, in this battle, Xiao Chen's physical strength. Of course, the black figure could only use physical strength to fight with Xiao Chen. In other words, the fifth layer of heaven was a test of the limits of the physical body. Under the premise that only the power of the physical body could be used, Xiao Chen had to defeat the human-shaped shadow in front of him in order to pass the test. Now that he knew the requirements of the test, the black figure let out a low roar and took the initiative to attack. Like an angry bull, he didn't make any fancy move. He simply charged straight at Xiao Chen. At the same time, facing the attack of the black figure, Xiao Chen didn't dodge. Instead, he punched out with both fists and met the black figure head-on. After a head-on collision, Xiao Chen only felt that the black figure's strength was no weaker than his. In a physical confrontation, he couldn't gain the slightest advantage. This guy, could it be? He guessed that the black figure's strength was probably based on his physical strength. They were on par with each other. Could it be that the fifth heaven would adjust the strength of the challengers according to their physical strength? No matter who entered the fifth layer of heaven, the strength of the human-shaped shadow would be different. The stronger one's physical strength, the stronger the human-shaped shadow would be. After guessing this, it seemed that the 100 Refinements Valley was really getting more and more difficult. After a bitter battle, Xiao Chen successfully defeated the black figure and passed the fifth heaven. The battle was very intense, and Xiao Chen had consumed a lot of energy. Therefore, after passing through the first 5 layers of heaven, Xiao Chen rested for a whole hour before entering the 6th layer of heaven. The further he went, the more difficult the 100 Refinements Valley became. From the 5th heaven onwards, Xiao Chen had to face one bitter battle after another. The 5th heaven was a test of physical strength, the 6th heaven was a test of speed, the 7th heaven was a test of soul power, and the 8th heaven was a test of combat awareness. His opponents were all the black figures whose appearances couldn't be seen clearly. During the test, except for the test, Xiao Chen's other strengths were completely sealed. For example, in the 5th heaven, Xiao Chen could only use his physical strength. In the 6th heaven, Xiao Chen could only use his speed. In the 7th heaven, he could only use his soul power. In the 8th heaven, there was nothing. He could only rely on his combat awareness to fight the black figure. 4 layers of heaven in a row represented 4 extremely difficult battles. To put it bluntly, the human-shaped shadows of these 4 layers of heaven were designed according to Xiao Chen's own abilities, so it would not be easy to beat them. After 2 days, Xiao Chen successfully passed the 8th heaven. After the battle in the 8th heaven, Xiao Chen's aura was a little weak. He sat cross-legged in the valley. After swallowing a medicinal pill, Xiao Chen closed his eyes and adjusted his breathing. At the same time that Xiao Chen successfully passed the 8th heaven, in the main courtyard where Gu Qi lived, a faint smile hung on his face as he looked towards the direction of the back mountain. There was a black door towering in the sky. At the same time, there were lines on the black door. If one observed carefully, under the division of the lines, the black door was divided into 36 sections from bottom to top. At the same time, light dots flashed on the door. These light dots represented the genius disciples who had entered the 100 Refinements Valley, and the 36 sections on the black door represented the 36 heavens of the 100 Refinements Valley. At this moment, these light dots were of different height. Through these light dots, the people in the outside world could determine the situation of everyone in the 100 Refinements Valley. The highest light dot appeared between the 8th heaven and the 9th heaven. This meant that this person had passed the 8th heaven but had yet to begin the 9th heaven. Looking at the highest light dot, Guqi was certain that this person was Xiaoqun. At this moment, Xiaoqun was far ahead in the 100 Refinements Valley. Guqi said faintly with a faint smile on his face. "It's already the 8th heaven? Not bad, not bad. However, the real assessment of the 100 Refinements Valley is coming next." Guqi was not the only one who had been paying attention to the situation in the 100 Refinements Valley. The other elders were the same. It could even be said that the gazes of everyone in the celestial equal sect were focused on the black door at the back of the mountain. There were people guarding the back of the mountain at almost every moment, reporting the situation in the 100 Refinements Valley to the disciples of the celestial equal sect. The situation in the 100 Refinements Valley was constantly updated. At the same time, the news that someone had passed the 8th heaven in 2 days quickly spread in the Tianqi sect. Chapter 531. The news that someone had passed through the 8th heaven in 2 days spread like wildfire in the Tianqi sect. It couldn't be helped. Every time the 100 Refinements Valley opened, it was undoubtedly the most important event in the Tianqi sect. At the same time, the 100 Refinements Valley's ranking had also become the most direct reflection of the sect's ranking. Every time the 100 Refinements Valley ended, the person with the best result would be recognized as the strongest person by all the disciples of the Tianqi sect. And now, Xiaoqun had passed through the 8th heaven in 2 days. Such speed could be said to be unprecedented. At least, no one had been able to do it before. Because the light spots on the black door couldn't determine who the person who had passed through the 8th heaven was, many disciples of the Tianqi sect began an intense discussion about the person's identity. Of course, among the many disciples, there were only 2 people who were most likely to be the person. They were Gu Lingyao and Chao He. After all, both of them were kings of pride. Between the 2 of them, Gu Lingyao's strength was obviously stronger than Chao He's. Therefore, most of the disciples believed that the person who had passed through the 8th heaven in 2 days was definitely Gu Lingyao. Gu Lingyao and Chao He had the most supporters, but there were also exceptions. A very small number of disciples believed that the person could also be Xiaoqun. Xiaoqun was Gu Lingyao's fiancé. Guqi had personally sanctioned the marriage. In addition, although the crowd didn't know much about Xiaoqun, the fact that he had easily defeated hundreds of disciples was enough to prove that Xiaoqun was extraordinary. Therefore, Xiaoqun could also be the person who had passed through the 8th heaven. Xiaoqun was very mysterious. It was precisely because of this that people couldn't see through him. They also didn't know how strong Xiaoqun was, or if he was stronger than Gu Lingyao. However, it was undeniable that if Xiaoqun was just an ordinary person, Guqi would definitely not have sanctioned the marriage. A small number of people chose to support Xiaoqun. This was probably something that no one had expected. There were actually people who would support Xiaoqun. The Tianqi sect was in a heated discussion about the 100 Refinements Valley. In the Tianqi sect, there were 2 people who could be sure that Xiaoqun was the person who had passed through the 8th heaven. They were Gu Lingyao and Chao He. The 2 of them followed closely behind Xiaoqun. However, no matter how hard they tried, they were still unable to catch up to Xiaoqun's progress. This made them feel helpless and bitter. Ugly Xiaoqun. Gu Lingyao's test. Although the test of each heaven was not simple and the further one went, it was undeniable that the 100 Refinements Valley could allow one to break through quickly without any side effects. This was the most important thing. There was no doubt that as long as he could persevere, it was not impossible for him to break through 2 small realms in a month and reach the perfected Tao querying realm. Breaking through 2 small realms in a month at the Tao querying realm. This speed could be said to be shocking. If it was in the outside world, even with Xiao Chen's talent and various cultivation resources, Xiao Chen would definitely not be able to do it. However, he could do it in the 100 Refinements Valley. This was the horror of a high-class cultivation mystic realm. It was far from being comparable to the premise of elixirs. At the same time, this was also the most fundamental reason why those sage sects were so powerful. This was because elixirs could be obtained as long as one had spiritual stones. However, it was impossible for cultivation mystic realms to be leaked. One could only enter the mystic realms to cultivate after becoming a disciple of a sage sect and reaching a certain level. Therefore, sage sects often placed great importance on cultivation mystic realms. This was the foundation of any powerful sect. No one in the 100 Refinements Valley was disappointed by Xiao Chen. After teasing him for 2 hours, Xiao Chen slowly opened his eyes. Then, he continued to break through without stopping and entered the 9th heaven. The difficulty of the previous 8 heavens was constantly increasing. Naturally, it was the same for the 9th heaven. Moreover, as Gu Qi had said, the 9th heaven was the beginning of the real assessment of the 100 Refinements Valley. After Xiao Chen entered the 9th heaven, a person who looked exactly like him appeared in front of Xiao Chen. It could be said that this was another version of himself. Cultivation, aura, appearance, all aspects were exactly the same as Xiao Chen. It was as if he was looking into a mirror. As the other version of himself appeared, the requirements of the 9th stage also appeared in Xiao Chen's mind. The requirements of the 9th stage were very simple. Other than not being able to rely on external forces, as long as one could defeat the other version of himself in front of him, it would be considered a success. It was a very simple and violent requirement. However, the difficulty was actually very high. In other words, Xiao Chen had to surpass his own limit. Otherwise, how could he possibly defeat himself? Without giving Xiao Chen much time to react, the other version of himself took the initiative to attack Xiao Chen. The sword in his hand was the Black Dragon Sword. Facing the attack of the other version of himself, Xiao Chen did not dare to be careless. He directly took out the Black Dragon Sword, and the two of them immediately engaged in a fierce battle. The two people who looked exactly the same held the same sword and fought fiercely. After a fierce battle, Xiao Chen also confirmed that the other version of himself in front of him was indeed not to be underestimated. In all aspects, it was almost exactly the same as him. There was not the slightest difference. Thus, it was not an easy task to defeat it. The fierce battle continued. In the end, Xiao Chen did not remember how long it took, but he finally passed the 9th heaven. It was indeed a very difficult battle, but he finally succeeded. With the help of elixirs, Xiao Chen used more than 2 hours to recover his condition to the peak. Then, he strode into the 10th heaven. Like the 9th heaven, the opponent in the 10th heaven was also himself. However, compared to the 9th heaven, the other version of himself in the 10th heaven was stronger. Helplessly laughing bitterly, Xiao Chen said unhappily, "Do I have to fight with myself in the following tests?" He felt a little helpless, but unfortunately, Xiao Chen was right. That's right. Starting from the 9th heaven, the following tests were all about fighting with oneself and constantly breaking through one's own limit. Facing an increasingly stronger version of oneself, one could only continue to move forward by defeating it. Of course, while constantly defeating oneself, Xiao Chen's body would also become weaker because every time one had to break through one's own limits to be able to defeat oneself. In the following time, Xiao Chen advanced triumphantly. In the blink of an eye, more than 20 days had passed. Xiao Chen also successfully arrived at the 30th heaven of the 100 Refinements Valley. Chapter 532. When Xiao Chen successfully passed the 30th heaven and appeared in the valley, if there were others present, they would definitely be shocked because Xiao Chen's current state was simply too miserable. His entire body was covered with wounds, and blood was constantly gushing out. His clothes had long been dyed red by blood, and his aura was extremely weak. Xiao Chen also smiled helplessly about his current state. There was no other way. This was the rule of the 100 Refinements Valley. In the past 20 days, Xiao Chen was almost driven crazy by the 100 Refinements Valley. He didn't know who created the 100 Refinements Valley. It was simply psychopathic. From the moment Xiao Chen entered the 100 Refinements Valley, he knew that the assessment of the 100 Refinements Valley would definitely be more difficult than the previous one. However, as he progressed, Xiao Chen realized that it could no longer be described as difficult. It could simply be described as psychopathic. From the 9th heaven onwards, Xiao Chen's opponent became himself. It was indeed the case after that. The requirement of every heaven was the same, and that was to defeat the self in front of him. However, as he progressed, the strength of the other self that Xiao Chen faced became stronger and stronger. If he wanted to pass the level, Xiao Chen had to constantly break through himself in order to win. This was still acceptable. However, the assessment of the 100 Refinements Valley was obviously not just about that. After the 15th level of heaven, Xiao Chen would have to face another version of himself. Not only would their strength continue to increase, but their numbers would also continue to increase. Could he withstand this? Starting from the 15th level of heaven, Xiao Chen had to face 2 clones of himself. Subsequently, the number of clones increased with each subsequent level of heaven. It was not until the 25th attempt that the number of people stopped increasing. However, this also meant that Xiao Chen had to face the combined attacks of 10 of himself every time. Furthermore, he had to defeat all 10 of himself in order to pass the level. There was no need to explain the difficulty of this. It could be said that from the 15th heaven onwards, Xiao Chen had gone all out in every battle. If it wasn't for Xiao Chen's firm mental state, he would have given up long ago. Because at a glance it was simply impossible to win this battle. Every aspect was identical to Shifeng's, not only in terms of cultivation realm, but also in terms of strength, speed, combat awareness, and soul power. In fact, Shifeng's clone was even slightly stronger than Shifeng's. Against such opponents, it would be difficult to defeat them one-on-one, let alone 1-on-10. In the face of such a test that could be said to be impossible to win, Xiao Chen gritted his teeth and persevered. However, after the 25th heaven, although the number of people did not increase, and Xiao Chen faced 10 people in each heaven, there was a time limit. Previously, every time he passed a heaven, he deliberately rested as he pleased. There was no fixed time, and it was completely under his control. In this way, he could adjust his condition to its peak before continuing. But from the 25th heaven onwards, it was completely different. Every time you passed a heaven, there would be a fixed amount of time to rest, and it would become less and less. At the beginning, there was only 1 day. Later on, there was a constant change. Just like now, after successfully passing the 30th heaven, Xiao Chen quickly received a message in his mind. That was, he had to challenge the 31st heaven within 6 hours. Otherwise, he would be considered to have failed. He would be directly sent out of the valley and returned to the original entrance. There were only 6 hours to rest. After knowing this, Xiao Chen suddenly had the urge to curse. Looking at his current condition, even if he was given a day, it would be difficult for him to recover, let alone 6 hours. Which bastard created this 100 Refinements Valley? Although he cursed in his heart, Xiao Chen did not waste any time. He immediately sat down cross-legged, swallowed a healing elixir, and began to adjust his breathing. Time was of the essence. Moreover, after 20 days of hard work, Xiao Chen's cultivation had already reached the pinnacle of the lesser completion Dao querying realm. He was not far from breaking through again. At such a critical juncture, how could Xiao Chen give up? If he could not break through to the advanced Tao querying realm in one go in the 100 Refinements Valley, he would undoubtedly have to waste more time to break through. Xiao Chen was unwilling to let go of such an opportunity. Although he knew that it would be more and more difficult to break through later, Xiao Chen did not have the slightest intention of backing down. Since there were only 6 hours, he could only make the best use of his time. He would recover to whatever extent he could. Xiao Chen intended to continue breaking through. Xiao Chen even wanted to see what the reward would be if he passed the 36th heaven. While Xiao Chen was making the best use of his time to heal, the Tianqi sect outside was in an uproar. The originally deserted peak of the back mountain was now filled with people. Elders, deacons, and disciples. Everyone was dumbfounded as they stared at the highest light spot above the black door. This light spot naturally represented Xiao Chen. At this moment, he was between the 30th and 31st heaven. In other words, Xiao Chen had successfully passed the 30th heaven. Oh my God, who is this person? He actually passed the 30th heaven. Many disciples looked at the light spot that represented Xiao Chen and were shocked. They could not help but exclaim, "The 30th heaven." This was a height that no one had ever reached since the opening of the 100 Refinements Valley. It could be said that this was a brand new record. Moreover, it was a record that left everyone dumbfounded. Because of this, almost all the disciples of the Tianqi sect had gathered at the peak of the back mountain. Everyone was guessing who this person was. Was it Gu Lingyao, Chao He, or the mysterious Xiao Chen? There were all sorts of guesses. Moreover, it was not just these disciples. Even the elders and deacons were discussing softly. It has only been 20 days. There are still 10 days left. Do you think this person can pass the 100 Refinements Valley? You mean pass the 36th heaven? That's impossible. Although I don't know the origin of the 100 Refinements Valley, countless generations of disciples have proven that it's not so easy to pass the 100 Refinements Valley. It's already heaven-defying enough to pass the 30th heaven. Some people guessed that Xiao Chen could pass the 36th heaven in one go and pass the 100 Refinements Valley directly. However, most people thought that it was impossible. After all, the difficulty of the 100 Refinements Valley was indeed too great. Moreover, it had nothing to do with cultivation. The difficulty of any cultivator who entered was actually the same. After all, the 100 Refinements Valley adjusted the difficulty according to the challenger's own situation. Most people thought that it was impossible for Xiao Chen to pass the level. However, there was still a small group of people who hoped that someone could pass the 100 Refinements Valley. After all, this was a historical scene. If Xiao Chen really did it, then everyone present would be witnesses to history. Chapter 533. Everyone was guessing Xiao Chen's identity while secretly looking forward to how far Xiao Chen could go. If Xiao Chen could really pass through the 100 Refinements Valley in one go, the entire celestial equal sect would probably be in an uproar. He did not know what kind of commotion his actions had caused. 6 hours passed in the blink of an eye. With the help of the healing elixir, Xiao Chen's physical condition improved a lot. However, he was still far from his peak. Dragging his body, Xiao Chen did not choose to give up and resolutely stepped into the 31st heaven. At the same time that Xiao Chen entered the 31st heaven, Gu Lingyao and Chao He, who were the closest to Xiao Chen, were also trying their best to climb higher. Gu Lingyao had already reached the 27th heaven, while Chao He was currently at the 22nd heaven. As for the others, they were still below the 20th heaven. Under normal circumstances, it was basically impossible to break through the 20th level of the 100 Refinements Valley if one was not a king of geniuses. Therefore, other than Xiao Chen, Gu Lingyao, and Chao He, the other prodigy disciples were still struggling bitterly below the 20th level of the 100 Refinements Valley. Even Mu Feng had only reached the 17th level of the 100 Refinements Valley. It had to be said that Gu Lingyao and Chao He's performance was already good enough, especially Gu Lingyao. He had reached the 27th heaven in 20 days. If it was in the previous 100 refinements valley, such a result would definitely be the focus of everyone's attention. Unfortunately, because of Xiao Chen's existence this time, Gu Lingyao and Xiao He were clearly forgotten by everyone. There was no first place in literature and no second place in martial arts. Under Xiao Chen's brilliance, Gu Lingyao and Xiao He were clearly overshadowed. No one cared about them because everyone's eyes were locked on Xiao Chen. As Xiao Chen entered the 31st heaven, someone in the Celestial Equal sect was the first to call out, "Look, it's starting. He's starting to challenge the 31st heaven." Following this person's voice, everyone's gaze shifted towards the black door. They saw that the light spot representing Xiao Chen had already entered the 31st heaven from the 30th heaven. This also meant that Xiao Chen had begun to challenge the 31st heaven. The challenge began again. Everyone stared intently at the black door. Although they couldn't see the process of the battle, it didn't stop them from looking forward to the result. While the Tianqi sect was in an uproar because of Xiao Chen's performance, Gu Qi sat in the bamboo courtyard where Gu Qi lived. He was sipping tea as he cast his gaze towards the back of the mountain. A hint of surprise flickered in his eyes. Could it be that this kid can really pass through the 100 Refinements Valley? If that's the case, then Master. Gu Qi was also shocked by Xiao Chen's performance. No one knew the 100 Refinements Valley better than Gu Qi. Moreover, it could be said that Gu Qi was the only one who knew the origin of the 100 Refinements Valley because he was the one who brought it back to the Tianqi sect. There was once an elder of the Tianqi sect who guessed that the 100 Refinements Valley was created by Gu Qi. However, Gu Qi smiled helplessly. These guys were underestimating the 100 Refinements Valley too much. Not to mention that Gu Qi was only a half-step saint expert on the surface. Even a saint expert couldn't create a cultivation mystic realm like the 100 Refinements Valley. The 100 Refinements Valley was created by Gu Qi's master. As for Gu Qi's master, he was an antique figure in the Tianhe continent. Of course, he was already dead now. However, while others didn't know how terrifying his master was, Gu Qi knew that his master was an almighty quasi-step saint expert, an existence that surpassed the saint stage. It could be said that Gu Qi's master was the last quasi-step saint in the Tianhe continent because after his master broke through to the quasi-step saint realm, the origin power of the Tianhe continent was also exhausted. Since then, no one in the entire Tianhe continent could break through to the quasi-step saint realm. Such a powerful antique figure had left behind the 100 Refinements Valley before his death. According to the Venerable of the World, his inheritance was hidden in the 100 Refinements Valley, and even Gu Qi didn't know what this inheritance was. According to his master's instructions, only those who passed through the 36th heaven of the 100 Refinements Valley had a chance to obtain the inheritance. Unfortunately, after so many years, no one could reach the 30th heaven, let alone pass through the 100 Refinements Valley. Xiao Chen was the first person to reach the 30th heaven of the 100 Refinements Valley. Gu Qi looked in the direction of the back mountain with a complicated expression in his eyes. After a long while, he murmured softly, "Little guy, can you really pass through the 100 Refinements Valley? If you can obtain Master's inheritance, it will definitely be an unimaginable fortune for you." He had a trace of expectation for Xiao Chen. Of course, Xiao Chen naturally didn't know all of this. At this time, Xiao Chen was still fighting a tough battle in the 31st heaven. Time passed slowly, and the 1-month deadline for the 100 Refinements Valley was getting closer and closer. There were only 3 days left before the 100 Refinements Valley closed, but more and more people gathered on the back mountain. So many people gathered on the back mountain for no other reason than Xiao Chen. At this time, Xiao Chen had already reached the 30th heaven. Everyone was dumbfounded when they saw the light spot land on the 35th heaven. However, this time, no one made a sound. Everyone was nervously waiting for the final result. As long as Xiao Chen passed through the 35th heaven, there would be hope for him to pass. Many disciples, deacons, and elders of the Tianchi sect stared at the light spot at the top of the black door. At this moment, even if Gu Lingyao, who was ranked second, passed the 30th heaven, no one cared. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Xiao Chen's light spot. In the 35th heaven, Xiao Chen's injuries were so severe that it was indescribable. Xiao Chen clenched his teeth tightly. He didn't have the slightest intention of retreating, because he was just a step away from breaking through to the perfected Tao querying realm. As long as he could pass through the 35th heaven and receive another infusion of spirit power, Xiao Chen would have absolute confidence in breaking through to the perfected Tao querying realm. This was an extremely crucial time. Therefore, no matter what, Xiao Chen had to successfully cross the 35th heaven. As for the final 36th heaven, Xiao Chen didn't care anymore. He was just a step away. He had to break through. As the saying went, a difference of a millimeter could lead to a loss of 1,000 miles. If he didn't grasp this opportunity, he would have to pay 1,000 times or even 10,000 times the time to break through to the perfected Tao querying realm. With the determination to never retreat, Xiao Chen finally passed through the 35th heaven after a series of tough battles. After successfully passing through the 35th heaven, the power of the laws descended once again. At the same time, the mysterious spirit power continuously poured into Xiao Chen's body. With the infusion of the spirit power, Xiao Chen's cultivation didn't have any hindrances. He smoothly broke through the perfected Tao querying realm and entered the perfected Tao querying realm. Chapter 534. He had finally broken through. In less than a month, Xiao Chen had completed 2 breakthroughs in his cultivation. Such progress was absolutely shocking. At the same time, it also reflected the heaven-defying nature of the 100 Refinements Valley. A cultivation mystic realm that could allow a Tao querying realm cultivator to break through 2 small realms in a month was probably the top cultivation mystic realm in the Sage sect. Of course, Xiao Chen did not know that the 100 Refinements Valley was a cultivation mystic realm created by a quasi-sage. Otherwise, a mystic realm created by a sage would naturally not be able to achieve such an effect. Moreover, the Tianhe continent no longer had the power of origin. A quasi-sage had not appeared for thousands of years. There were probably no quasi-sages left in the Tianhe continent now. After all, Gu Qi's master was already dead. His body's condition was terrible, but at this moment, Xiao Chen was extremely happy. He had succeeded. He had finally succeeded in breaking through. At the same time, Xiao Chen felt that this trip to the 100 Refinements Valley had been considered a success. As for the last 36th heaven, Xiao Chen did not intend to challenge it again. It was not wrong to never retreat. However, if one knew that it was impossible and still tried, it would be stupid. Just like now, Xiao Chen's physical condition was obviously not enough to continue challenging the 36th heaven. Although Xiao Chen also wanted to see what would happen after clearing the 100 Refinements Valley and what rewards he would get, Xiao Chen still chose to give up because he really could not take it anymore. He forced his way through the 35th heaven and made another breakthrough in his cultivation. This was already Xiao Chen's limit. With the end of the infusion of spiritual power and the disappearance of the power of laws, Xiao Chen's figure came to the valley. In front of him was also a light door. This was the entrance to the 36th heaven. At the same time, it was also the end of the 100 Refinements Valley. As Xiao Chen left the 35th heaven, in the outside world, at the top of the back mountain, waves of gasps could be heard continuously. He had passed. He had really passed. Someone had passed the 35th heaven. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, who would dare to believe that someone could pass the 35th heaven in the 100 Refinements Valley this time? Only the last heaven is left. As long as he passes it, he can pass the 100 Refinements Valley. Although I do not know who that person is, regardless of who he is, I hope that he will be able to pass through the 100 Refinements Valley. Everyone hoped that Xiao Chen could continue to challenge the levels. It would be best if he could clear the 100 Refinements Valley in one go. Just as everyone was thinking this, the light spot that represented Xiao Chen on the black door only paused for about 10 seconds after passing the 35th level before entering the 36th level. This change caused everyone to be stunned. What was going on? Doesn't this person need rest? I just cleared the 35th layer of heaven and entered the 36th layer of heaven without any rest. They were a little shocked, but they could not figure it out. Everyone knew, even those who had never entered the 100 Refinements Valley had heard of it. In the 100 Refinements Valley, there would be a period of rest after each level was cleared. During this period of time, the challenger could recover. However, Xiao Chen did not stop and directly entered the 36th layer of heaven. This was somewhat puzzling. Of course, the reason why Xiao Chen entered the 36th layer of heaven was actually not what everyone thought. After leaving the 35th layer of heaven, Xiao Chen originally planned to wait here until the 100 Refinements Valley ended. After all, with his current state, he really did not have the strength to challenge the 36th layer of heaven. However, as soon as this thought appeared in his mind, before Xiao Chen could sit down cross-legged, a terrifying suction force suddenly appeared from the light door of the 36th layer of heaven and pulled Xiao Chen in without any explanation. Without any strength to resist, he was forcefully pulled into the 36th layer of heaven. Xiao Chen's expression immediately changed and he cursed helplessly. F***ck, is this a trap? Can't I choose not to challenge it? There was no choice at all. In the blink of an eye, Xiao Chen was pulled into the 36th layer of heaven. The scene in front of him changed. In the end, when Xiao Chen came back to his senses, he appeared in a world full of birds and fragrant flowers. It seemed to be the end of a valley. There were towering cliffs on three sides. However, the scenery here was quite beautiful. There was a small lake. The grass on the ground was green, and a few ancient trees that were not tall surrounded the small lake. The scenery was very good. Looking around suspiciously, Xiao Chen was puzzled. This place that looks like a paradise is the end of the 100 Refinements Valley? This scene is not right. It is completely different from the previous 35th layer of heaven. Obviously, the feeling of the 36th layer of heaven was completely different from what Xiao Chen had imagined. Just as Xiao Chen was puzzled, an old voice sounded out of nowhere. Finally, someone has come. I can't wait any longer. The voice appeared out of nowhere. Hearing this, Xiao Chen looked around vigilantly. Since entering the 100 Refinements Valley, Xiao Chen had always been alone. This was also the rule of the 100 Refinements Valley. Now that he suddenly heard this voice, it naturally made Xiao Chen vigilant. Just as Xiao Chen was searching for the source of the old voice sounded again. At the same time, a tall and sturdy old man slowly appeared in front of Xiao Chen. Kid, you don't have to look for me. I'm here. Looking at the old man in front of him, this old man was very strange. He was clearly just skin and bones, but he gave off an extremely strong feeling. Moreover, the old man's body was a little weak. With a glance, Xiao Chen could tell that this old man was just a wisp of soul. No, not a soul, but a saint's soul. This was because Xiao Chen sensed the power of laws from the old man. After a warrior broke through the saint realm and became a saint, not only did he shed his mortal body, but even his soul would undergo a qualitative change and become a saint's soul. A saint's soul could exist for a very, very long time. As long as it was properly preserved, theoretically, a saint's soul could exist forever. It would not slowly dissipate with the passage of time like a soul. A saint's soul would not. However, once a saint fell and his physical body died, only his saint's soul remained. This meant that he could no longer use his power at will and could not drift around. He had to use a special method to preserve his saint's soul and let it fall into a deep sleep. Only in this way could he maintain his saint's soul for a long time without dissipating. Otherwise, once his power was exhausted, his saint's soul would also dissipate. The old man in front of him was just a wisp of a saint's soul. Looking at him, Xiao Chun took the initiative to ask, "Who are you?" "Haha, kid, you are very direct. My surname is Shu, and my name is Feng. You can call me Elder Shu." In the face of Xiao Chen's inquiry, the old man did not hide anything and answered truthfully. Xiao Chen naturally did not know Shu Feng. However, if it was Gu Qi or the older saints of the Tianhe continent, they would definitely know this person. This was because Shu Feng was recorded as the last quasi-saint of the Tianhe continent. At the same time, he was Gu Qi's master. Chapter 535. He did not expect to meet Shu Feng at the last level. However, Xiao Chen did not know his identity. He looked at Shu Feng and said, "So, you are the last test of the 100 Refinements Valley?" The 36th level was the last level of the 100 Refinements Valley. Shu Feng revealed a treacherous smile when he heard Xiao Chen's words. "Hee, you can say so. Moreover, as long as you pass the test of the 36th level, you will obtain a heaven-defying opportunity. It can be said to be the final reward of the entire 100 Refinements Valley." It was obvious that Shu Feng was trying to seduce Xiao Chen. However, Xiao Chen was indeed a little tempted when he heard his words. Along the way, Xiao Chen did not doubt the mystery of the 100 Refinements Valley. Just his current cultivation was enough to show how extraordinary the 100 Refinements Valley was. As if he could see that Xiao Chen was a little tempted, Shu Feng continued, "Hee, little fellow, I can tell you responsibly that compared to the true reward of the 100 Refinements Valley, the infusion of spiritual energy you experienced earlier is just trash. Compared to the final reward, everything before was just trash." Xiao Chen began to feel conflicted when he heard Shu Feng's words. First of all, his current physical condition was not good. It could even be said that it was very bad. However, he had already reached this step. If he gave up, how could Xiao Chen be willing? He kept thinking in his heart. After a while, Xiao Chen suddenly remembered that Gu Lingyao had briefly introduced the 100 Refinements Valley to him. At that time, the two of them were still in the Moonless Empire. At that time, Gu Lingyao told Xiao Chen that if he entered the 100 Refinements Valley, he had to do his best to reach a higher level. Only then would he be able to obtain more opportunities and rewards. He did not have to worry about his own safety because there was no danger to his life in the 100 Refinements Valley. Once he could not hold on, the rules of the 100 Refinements Valley would automatically judge him as a failure and send him out. There was no danger to his life within the 100 Refinements Valley. When he suddenly recalled the words that Gu Lingyao had once said to him, Xiao Chen's heart calmed down. He quickly made a decision. Since there was no danger to his life, he would naturally give it a try. At the very most, he would fail. The expression in his eyes changed. Seeing this, a smile flashed across Shu Feng's eyes. He looked at Xiao Chen with a smile and said, "Boy, it seems like you have made your decision. Elder, just tell me directly. What are the requirements to pass the 36th heaven?" Xiao Chen replied. He had already decided to give it his all. Hearing this, Shu Feng pointed at the small lake not far away. Actually, although it was called a small lake, it was more like a pond because its area was indeed too small. Its diameter was not more than 10 meters. Go in first. I will tell you the requirements to pass the 36th heavenly layer later. Shu Feng said. Without doubting Shu Feng's words, Xiao Chen stepped into the pond. It was not deep. However, the moment Xiao Chen entered the pond, a huge suction force appeared and immediately restricted Xiao Chen's movements. The sudden change caused Xiao Chen's expression to change slightly. At this moment, Shu Feng also came to the side of the lake. He still had a smile on his face as he looked at Xiao Chen and said, "Boy, this is the test of the 36th heaven. This pond is called the 100 Refinements Blood Pool. It is the most crucial step in cultivating the 100 Refinements battle body. What you need to do is to persevere. When you are able to cultivate the first layer of the 100 Refinements Battle Body, you will pass the test of the 100 Refinements Valley. The 100 Refinements Battle Body is the final reward of the 100 Refinements Valley. The 100 Refinements Battle Body was the final reward of the 100 Refinements Valley. Hearing this, Xiao Chen was slightly stunned. Xiao Chen had never heard of the 100 Refinements Battle Body. However, in the Tianhe continent, the 100 Refinements Battle Body was recognized as the #1 body refining technique. Xu Feng had also cultivated the 100 Refinements Battle Body, so he was very clear about the strength of the 100 Refinements Battle Body. It could even be said that if it were not for the 100 Refinements Battle Body, Xu Feng would not have become a quasi-saint. On the Tianhe continent, many experts thought that the 100 Refinements Battle Body was created by Xu Feng. However, only Xu Feng knew that he could not create such a mysterious body refining technique with his own ability. Xu Feng guessed that the person who created the 100 Refinements Battle Body was at least a great sage or an existence of a higher level. Otherwise, it was impossible to create such a peerless technique like the 100 Refinements Battle Body. Unfortunately, although the 100 Refinements Battle Body was strong, the requirements to cultivate it, or the threshold, were also very high. Xu Feng once planned to pass the 100 Refinements Battle Body to Guqi, but Guqi could not meet the requirements to cultivate the 100 Refinements Battle Body at all. Therefore, after Xu Feng's death, the 100 Refinements Battle Body did not find a suitable successor. Peerless cultivation methods were often not something that could be cultivated just because one wanted to. The threshold was so high that it was enough to shut out 99% of the warriors. It was just like how all warriors wanted to obtain a peerless cultivation method, but at the same time, a peerless cultivation method also hoped to meet a warrior who was worthy of it. If one did not have the ability and forcibly cultivated a peerless technique, there would often only be one result, which was to seek one's own destruction. As Xu Feng's voice fell, before Xiao Chen could say anything, the entire pool underwent a huge change. In just a few breaths, the originally clear pool suddenly turned blood-red. It had turned into a pool of blood. At the same time, with the appearance of the pool of blood, Xiao Chen only felt that something was constantly drilling into his body. Gradually, an unbearable pain quickly swept through Xiao Chen's body. He gritted his teeth and looked at Xu Feng, who was beside the pool, in horror. In the face of Xiao Chen's gaze, Xu Feng still smiled and said, "Boy, it is not so easy to cultivate the 100 Refinements Battle Body successfully. This is also the test that the 100 Refinements Valley said. Now, there are only two paths in front of you. Either you cultivate the first level of the 100 Refinements Battle Body and obtain the final reward of the 100 Refinements Valley from me, which is the cultivation method of the 100 Refinements Battle Body, or you can only die in this pool of blood. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you. The previous 35 levels were indeed not life-threatening, but the 36th level is different. You will die. So, if you don't want to die, boy, you'd better do your best. You will die." Hearing Xu Feng's words, Xiao Chen instantly had the urge to curse. This old man was simply a fraud. Why didn't he say it just now? Why did he have to wait until he had no way out before telling him that the 36th level was a death trap? As his voice fell, Xu Feng no longer cared about Xiao Chen. He hummed a little tune and walked away. Xiao Chen, who was behind, could not help but let out a scream because the pain in his body was getting more and more intense. It was as if his entire body was being torn apart piece by piece. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 536. Xiao Chen wasn't a person who couldn't endure pain, but the pain this time was simply, he didn't know how to describe it. Imagine, his flesh was being torn apart piece by piece. What kind of feeling was that? Xiao Chen couldn't help but scream. Hearing Xiao Chen scream, the smile on Xu Feng's face slowly faded away as she turned around. He knew the pain of practicing the 100 tempering war god, so he could understand what Xiao Chen was enduring. Back then, when he practiced the 100 tempering war god, he almost died. As for Guqi, he didn't even enter the blood pool. He only put a finger in and he couldn't stand it. But now, Xiao Chen's entire body was soaked in the blood pool. Let's hope that this little guy can hold on. Guqi sighed softly as he thought to himself. Then, he left without looking back. Xu Feng had disappeared, but for Xiao Chen, the real hell had only just begun. As the blood continuously flowed into Xiao Chen's body through his pores, Xiao Chen's entire body turned red like burning charcoal. Xiao Chen clenched his teeth so hard that they were about to shatter, but the pain didn't lessen at all. Instead, it became more and more intense. At the same time, a powerful suction force from the blood pool kept pulling Xiao Chen down, as if it wanted to drag him into hell. Xiao Chen struggled fiercely, but unfortunately, it was useless. Soon, Xiao Chen was pulled into the blood pool. At the same time, the blood pool quickly regained its calm. Only 2 bubbles would appear from time to time. Xiao Chen gradually sank into the blood pool. He really wanted to faint. At least that way, he wouldn't have to endure this inhumane torture. However, the desire to live in his heart kept telling Xiao Chen that he couldn't lose consciousness. He couldn't faint. Otherwise, he might never wake up again. In order to survive, he absolutely couldn't faint. He had to hold on. Otherwise, everything would be over. Xiao Chen forcibly held on to the last trace of consciousness. However, in a sober state, the constant pain from his body was really unbearable. Every second felt as long as a century. Since Xu Feng created the 100 Tempering Valley, Xiao Chen was the first person to reach the 30th heaven. Therefore, no one in the world knew anything about the 36th heaven. Therefore, Xiao Chen could only rely on himself to cross the river. He didn't know how long he had to hold on, but Xiao Chen knew very well that he could only hold on. Once he failed, it would mean death. Xiao Chen gritted his teeth and held on in the 36th heaven. At the same time, the 1-month deadline of the 100 Tempering Valley was getting closer and closer. Several days later, many disciples, deacons, elders, and even Guqi appeared at the peak of the back mountain of the Celestial Equal Sect. It was for no other reason than today was the day the 100 Refinements Valley was closed. It was time for the disciples of the Heavenly Sect who had entered the 100 Refinements Valley for a month to leave. Everyone looked at the highest light spot. At this time, the light spot had stopped at the 36th heaven for a few days. Many disciples were discussing softly. It's been so many days. Hasn't he passed the 36th heaven? Do you think it's so easy to pass through the 100 Tempering Valley? Just wait and see. The 100 Tempering Valley will be closed in another 15 minutes. At that time, everyone will be teleported out. We will also know who has reached the 36th heaven. Until now, no one knew who had reached the 36th heaven. However, the second light spot had stopped at the 30th heaven. This light spot undoubtedly represented Gu Lingyao. In a month's time, Gu Lingyao had also tried his best to pass through the 30th heaven. However, this was already Gu Lingyao's limit. In the past few days, Gu Lingyao had tried to pass through the 31st heaven several times, but unfortunately, all of them ended in failure. Time passed slowly. A quarter of an hour soon passed. At this time, the tightly shut black iron door slowly opened. Then, the disciples who entered the 100 Tempering Valley were teleported out one by one. Starting from the lower levels, the lower the ranking of the Heaven's Pride disciples, the earlier they would be teleported out. Therefore, no one paid too much attention to those who were teleported out first. Now, everyone's eyes were on the person who had reached the 36th heaven. The Heaven's Pride disciples were teleported out one after another. Soon, Chao He and Gu Lingyao appeared on the scene one after another. Chao He was teleported out before Gu Lingyao. Seeing the two of them, many disciples present were stunned. What's going on? Gu Lingyao and Chao He had been teleported out of the 100 Tempering Valley, but the light spot above the black iron door did not disappear. In other words, the person who had reached the 36th heaven was not Chao He or Gu Lingyao, but someone else. This, not only the disciples, but even some deacons were in disbelief. Most people thought that the person who had reached the 36th heaven must be Gu Lingyao, but now it was obvious that it was not him. If it's not Senior Chao He or Senior Sister Lingyao, then who could it be? Someone whispered softly. However, facing this question, no one could answer. When Gu Lingyao and Chao He were teleported out, and everyone was waiting for the last person to appear, the black iron door suddenly closed slowly. This change stunned everyone present. The black iron door closed? There's still someone in there. Why did it close directly? Every time the 100 Tempering Valley opened, everyone would be teleported out after a month. But now there was still one person who hadn't come out, and the black iron door closed by itself. This was something that had never happened before. Everyone was stunned, but soon someone shouted. Shao Chen didn't appear. He's the one who reached the 36th heaven. All the prodigy disciples had already left the 100 Refinements Valley. Only Shao Chen had not appeared. As a result, it was certain that the person who was still in the 100 Refinements Valley and had reached the 36th level of heaven was definitely Shao Chen. No one expected that the person that everyone had been guessing was actually Shao Chen. This was indeed shocking. But now, they didn't know if they should be happy or worried because Shao Chen was still in the 100 Tempering Valley and hadn't been teleported out. No one knew what was going on. Gu Lingyao also came to Gu Qi's side and said with a worried look, Father, Shao Chen, please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 537. The black iron door had already closed, but Shao Chen had yet to come out. At this moment, Gu Lingyao also knew that Shao Chen had actually reached the 36th heaven. However, now was not the time to be happy because no one knew what Shao Chen had encountered in the 36th heaven or if there was any danger. In fact, Gu Lingyao's performance this time was indeed dazzling enough. It was a pity that he had encountered Shao Chen. If not for Shao Chen, Gu Lingyao's result of reaching the 30th heaven was enough to set off a storm in the Tianqi sect. Gu Lingyao did not feel the slightest bit of jealousy because Shao Chen had overshadowed his brilliance. On the contrary, he was very worried about Shao Chen's safety. He did not know why, but after knowing that Shao Chen had not left the 100 Refinements Valley, Gu Lingyao's heart was in a mess. He even had the thought of rushing into the 100 Refinements Valley again. Facing his daughter's question, Gu Qi revealed a strange smile on his face. His daughter probably had some unusual feelings for Shao Chen. Otherwise, why would she be so concerned about Shao Chen? Sensing Gu Qi's smile, Gu Lingyao's face immediately turned red. He lowered his head and did not dare to look at Gu Qi. Seeing this, Gu Qi said slowly, Shao Chen is now at the 36th heaven. He will definitely have his own good fortune. It's useless for us to worry. Arrange for someone to guard here. Gu Qi knew what was in the 36th heaven. However, whether or not he could obtain that peerless opportunity would depend on Shao Chen himself. Gu Qi had no other choice. Hearing Gu Qi's words, Gu Lingyao fell into silence. Since even Gu Qi said that there was no other way, it was obvious that this was the only way. The black door had already closed, but it did not disappear. This was another strange thing. In the past, after the 100 Refinements Valley closed, the black iron door would dissipate. However, it did not this time. Could it be because of Shao Chen? Everyone guessed. The huge black door was still standing at the top of the mountain. Gu Qi didn't explain anything about it. He only arranged for Tian Guochuan to guard the door and inform him immediately if there were any changes. After leaving Tian Guochuan behind, Gu Qi left with Gu Lingyao. As for the others, after waiting for a while, they saw that Shao Chen still had no intention of appearing. Although they were curious, they chose to leave one after another. Unaware that the 100 Refinements Valley had closed, Xiao Chen continued to grit his teeth and endure in the blood pool. He had no idea how much time had passed. Xiao Chen felt as though he had been in the blood pool for centuries. Every second was unbearable. As Xiao Chen stubbornly persisted, Xu Feng, who had disappeared for several days, reappeared at the edge of the blood pool. Xu Feng revealed a hint of surprise as he looked at the calm blood pool. It's already been 4 days. Can this little guy really succeed? Xiao Chen's performance surprised Xu Feng. At the same time, there was also a hint of excitement. Xu Feng's greatest wish was to pass down the 100 Refinements battle body. Unfortunately, there were too few people who met the cultivation requirements of the 100 Refinements battle body. Xu Feng hadn't found anyone until his death. He was very clear about the terror of the 100 Refinements battle body. Xu Feng was able to become a quasi-saint by relying on the 100 Refinements battle body. Moreover, Xu Feng hadn't succeeded in cultivating the 100 Refinements battle body. He could only be considered to have cultivated half of it. Even so, Xu Feng still relied on it to reach the quasi-saint realm. It was hard to imagine what it would be like to cultivate the 100 Refinements battle body to the perfection realm. Therefore, Xu Feng sincerely hoped that Xiao Chen could succeed. Otherwise, a peerless technique like the 100 Refinements battle body would disappear from the world. Xu Feng stared blankly at the blood pool. After a while, he left again. 4 days wasn't enough. Xiao Chen still had to persist. Otherwise, the result would still be death. Unaware of Xu Feng's appearance, Xiao Chen didn't have the mind to care about other things at this time. All of his attention was focused on resisting the erosion of the sharp pain. After 4 whole days, the sharp pain didn't lessen at all. On the contrary, it became more and more unbearable. However, under such sharp pain, Xiao Chen also discovered that his physical body was undergoing some kind of transformation, especially his skin. It seemed to be being transformed and constantly tempered. What Xiao Chen didn't know was that under this continuous tempering, Xiao Chen's skin was indeed undergoing some kind of transformation. Once this transformation was completed, it was equivalent to Xiao Chen successfully cultivating the first layer of the 100 Refinements battle body, the Golden Armor realm. Of course, this was only the entry level. Xiao Chen didn't know all this. After all, Xu Feng didn't explain anything to him. He just told him to persist, otherwise he would die. Therefore, Xiao Chen could only grit his teeth and persist. Damn it, when will this pain stop? Xiao Chen cursed in his heart. In the beginning, facing such sharp pain, Xiao Chen would still struggle for a while. However, he didn't even have the strength to struggle now. He could only endure all of this silently. Only Xiao Chen was left in the entire 100 Refinements valley. In the paradise of the 36th heaven, Xiao Chen silently endured the inhuman torture. Time passed day by day. After 7 days, Xu Feng appeared at the side of the blood pool again. This time, Xu Feng actually revealed a smile on his face. Looking at the blood pool that had faded a lot, Xu Feng chuckled and said, "This kid is indeed not an ordinary person. He actually succeeded." Persisting in the blood pool for 7 days meant that Xiao Chen had succeeded. Now, Xiao Chen had already entered the entry level of the first layer of the 100 Refinements battle body, the Golden Armor realm. When Xu Feng first began to cultivate the 100 Refinements battle body, he also persisted for 7 days. Now, Xiao Chen had done it. It could be said that Xiao Chen had succeeded. Even if he was unconscious now, his life would no longer be in danger. However, Xiao Chen didn't know about this. He still gritted his teeth and persisted. However, after 7 days, Xiao Chen also discovered that the pain didn't seem to be so intense anymore. He didn't know if the power of the blood pool had weakened or if he had already adapted to this kind of pain. Xiao Chen naturally didn't know that he had already entered the entry level of the first layer of the 100 Refinements battle body, the Golden Armor realm. On the shore, Xu Feng didn't have any intention of reminding Xiao Chen. Since he had persisted for 7 days, Shu Feng also wanted to see how long this kid could persist. If he could persist until the energy in the blood pool was completely absorbed, it would definitely be of great benefit to Xiao Chen's future cultivation. In this way, Xiao Chen might really be able to cultivate the 100 refinements battle body to the perfection realm. Kid, don't disappoint this old man. This old man hasn't been able to successfully cultivate the 100 refinements battle body in my life. If you can succeed, this old man's wish will be fulfilled. Shu Feng looked at the depths of the blood pool where a figure vaguely appeared and muttered softly. Let me tell everyone something. Due to some matters at home, I need to return to my hometown for 6 days. Therefore, from today until the 21st, there will be adjustments to the update. From 4 updates a day to 3 updates a day. After the 21st, it will return to normal. Of course, I will make up for the 6 days that I owe you. Chapter 538. He looked at Xiao Chen with a smile on his face. As time passed, the blood in the blood pool became thinner and thinner. At this time, Xiao Chen could be clearly seen on the shore. For 3 days in a row, Shu Feng did not leave the side of the blood pool. Seeing that Xiao Chen had no intention of leaving, Shu Feng could no longer remain calm. 10 days, it had been 10 days. Xiao Chen had stayed in the blood pool for 10 days. He was full of joy. After waiting for so many years, the most suitable person for the tempered battle body had finally appeared. There was no doubt that the tempered battle body would be much stronger in the hands of Xiao Chen than in the hands of Shu Feng. This was because Shu Feng had not been able to cultivate the tempered battle body completely, but Xiao Chen might succeed. Shu Feng was very excited when he thought that Xiao Chen would cultivate the tempered battle body to perfection one day. It was hard to imagine what kind of power Xiao Chen would have when that time came. Another 2 days passed. Shu Feng was still waiting on the shore without disturbing Xiao Chen. He had been in the blood pool for 12 days, and the energy in the blood pool was almost completely absorbed by Xiao Chen. On this day, Xiao Chen soared into the sky from the blood pool. His body exuded a rich golden light, as if a layer of golden armor had wrapped around Xiao Chen's body. At the same time, a faint golden halo appeared behind Xiao Chen, illuminating Xiao Chen like a Buddha. It was hard to look at him directly. A golden sun. That's right. At this moment, Xiao Chen was like a golden sun, exuding a chilling aura. After about 100 breaths, the golden light on Xiao Chen's body slowly receded and then slowly fell. However, at this time, the clothes on Xiao Chen's body had clearly disappeared long ago. Xiao Chen did not pay attention to the excited Shu Feng at the side. He minded his own business and went to put on a set of clothes, then turned to look at Shu Feng. Old man, you almost got me killed this time. Xiao Chen's words were filled with resentment. However, Shu Feng was a saint after all, so what could he do even if he was filled with resentment? He could only grumble. In any case, he would definitely not be able to defeat Shu Feng. Even though he was only left with a wisp of saint soul, he could definitely suppress him easily. Naturally, Shu Feng could feel the resentment in Xiao Chen's heart. However, he didn't care and laughed loudly. Haha boy, you still blame this old man. If it wasn't for this old man, how could you have such a great fortune? How is it? Is there any difference between this body and the previous one? Shu Feng didn't care about Xiao Chen's complaints at all. After hearing his words, Xiao Chen didn't care anymore. He nodded and said truthfully, "It's a world of difference." Indeed, although he had fallen into Shu Feng's trap and suffered for more than 10 days, the benefits were obviously not small. It could even be said that it was immeasurable. In just 12 days, Xiao Chen's body had undergone earth-shaking changes. Compared with his previous body, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was a world of difference. Xiao Chen's heart was filled with excitement. Although he had suffered a lot, the harvest was also unimaginable. As Shu Feng said, compared with the tempered battle body, the previous rewards were simply trash. This sentence wasn't an exaggeration at all. Seeing that Xiao Chen was also somewhat unable to contain the excitement in his heart, Xu Feng smiled and said, "That's why you're still full of resentment. Do you know how many people in the Tianhe continent want to obtain the tempered battle body? Even those saints would go crazy for it. Old man, this tempered battle body is indeed unimaginably strong. I wonder what level of body refining cultivation technique it is?" Xiao Chun had no doubt about the strength of the tempered battle body because he had personally experienced it. In the face of Xiao Chen's inquiry, Xu Feng didn't hide anything about the tempered battle body at this time. There was a touch of pride on his face as he said, "According to this old man's guess, the level of this tempered battle body has already surpassed the saint level." Surpassed the saint level? Hearing this, Xiao Chen's face changed slightly. After the heaven level was the saint level, and a saint level martial skill was absolutely in existence that could destroy heaven and earth. In the entire Tianhe continent, the number of saint level martial skills could be counted on one hand. Moreover, only the powerful sage sects that truly dominated the Tianhe continent could possess such saint-level martial skills. A sage sect like Tianfeng Xingzong, which only had one saint, definitely didn't have any saint-level martial skills. Xiao Chen was surprised by the terror of the tempered battle body, but soon reacted. Listening to Xu Feng's words, he wasn't sure about the exact level of the tempered battle body. For a moment, Xiao Chen was a little puzzled. Wasn't the tempered battle body created by this old man in front of him? As if seeing the doubts in Xiao Chen's heart, Xu Feng took the initiative to explain before Xiao Chen could open his mouth. "Brat, you guessed right. This 100 tempering battle body was indeed not created by me. Although I was a quasi-saint when I was alive, unfortunately, even a quasi-saint would not be able to create such a peerless technique like the 100 tempering battle body. Moreover, this old man can also tell you that this old man has only cultivated half of the tempered battle body in my entire life, and I didn't really succeed in cultivating it. But even so, this old man still relied on the tempered battle body to become a quasi-sage. Moreover, in this old man's era, I was recognized as the strongest person in the Tianhe continent. Even other quasi-sages of the same realm were no match for this old man in terms of physical strength. So, don't underestimate this tempered battle body. Its power is beyond your imagination. Of course, the premise is that you can successfully cultivate it. Haha, well, since you have passed the test, this old man will impart the tempered battle body to you." Because Xiao Chun had successfully cultivated the first layer of the tempered battle body, the golden armor realm, Xu Feng didn't hide anything about the tempered battle body. As soon as his voice fell, Xu Feng bent his finger, and a ray of light instantly entered Xiao Chen's forehead. A huge amount of information was also imprinted in Xiao Chen's mind. What Xu Feng imparted to Xiao Chen was the cultivation method of the tempered battle body. As this information was imprinted in Xiao Chen's mind, Xiao Chen finally truly experienced the terror of the tempered battle body. The tempered battle body was divided into the golden armor realm, the jade organs realm, the heavenly body realm, and the indestructible realm. Xiao Chen was only at the beginning of the golden armor realm. It could be said that he had only just stepped through the threshold of the tempered battle body. This was already enough for Xiao Chen to suffer. It was truly difficult to imagine just how much pain and resources he would have to endure if he wanted to reach the indestructible realm. It was no wonder that even Xu Feng had only reached the jade organs realm in his entire life. Xiao Chen looked a little dazed, and it took him a while to come back to his senses. Seeing this, Xu Feng naturally knew what Xiao Chen was thinking. When he first got the tempered battle body, he was also like this, and he was even more shocked than Xiao Chen. Xu Feng smiled. "Kid, now you know how terrifying the tempered battle body is. Alright, I've already given you the tempered battle body. However, this old man still has a fortune to give you. As for whether you can grasp it or not, that will depend on your own ability. begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 539. Previously, Shao Chun had only just touched the threshold of the 100-tempered battle body. Now, after Xu Feng taught Shao Chun the entire 100-tempered battle body, Shao Chun truly understood the horror and mystery of the 100-tempered battle body. The 100-tempered battle body was indeed worthy of being called a peerless cultivation technique. Shao Chun also believed that Xu Feng was not talking nonsense just now. The 100-tempered battle body was at least an existence that surpassed a saint-level cultivation technique, or even higher. Not to mention anything else, after the 100-tempered battle body was cultivated to the extreme, which was the 4th level of the indestructible realm, it was known as the indestructible physical body. One could imagine how strong it was. After a long while, Shao Chun recovered from the shock. At this time, when he heard that Xu Feng was going to give him a great opportunity, Shao Chun's eyes flashed with excitement. Noticing the change in Shao Chun's expression, Xu Feng laughed and scolded, "You little guy, don't think too much. The opportunity that this old man will give you next is naturally far inferior to the 100-tempered battle body, but it is still extremely useful for you now." The greatest opportunity in the 100-tempered valley, the 100-tempered battle body, had already been obtained by Shao Chun. What Xu Feng was going to give Shao Chun next was just a drizzle compared to the 100-tempered battle body. Hearing Xu Feng's words, Shao Chun's face did not show any disappointment. Thinking about it, there was probably no opportunity better than the 100-tempered battle body in the entire Tianhe continent. The harvest of this trip to the 100-tempered valley was far beyond Shao Chun's expectations. As soon as his voice fell, Xu Feng formed a seal with both hands. Immediately, a talisman array of only 10 square meters appeared in front of Shao Chun. After the talisman array appeared, Xu Feng said with a smile, "This array is called the Path Array, and it is a saint-level talisman array. However, this array is a one-time use talisman array. The energy in it can only last for 5 days. If you cultivate in this array with your current cultivation, there is hope that you can break through to the Tao validation realm. However, whether you can succeed or not still depends on your own ability." The Tao Travel Array was a special array formation for its master to break through to the Tao Confirmation realm. Many great forces of the Heavenly River continent had once drawn it. However, the biggest problem with this formation was that it could only be used once. To put it simply, this formation was different from teleportation formations that could be used repeatedly. Once it was inscribed, it could only be used once before it would collapse. Because of this characteristic, the cost of inscribing a formation was very high. This was because a huge amount of resources had been invested, and after inscribing it could only be used by one person. Because the Taoist formation consumed a lot of energy and was a one-time use talisman array, many major forces on the Tianhe continent also directed them to be used on their top disciples. Even the sage sects were the same. After all, the cost was too high. Even the sage sects couldn't afford it. This Tao Travel Array was the last good fortune that Xu Feng had given to Shao Chun. Compared to the tempered battle body, this Tao Travel Array was nothing. It was trash. However, if he could use it to break through to the Tao validation realm, it would be a huge opportunity for Shao Chun. Or perhaps it should be said that if he didn't have the tempered battle body, this Tao Travel Array would be Shao Chun's greatest harvest in the 100 Refinements Valley. Unfortunately, something as precious as the Tao Travel Array was nothing in front of the tempered battle god. After briefly explaining the Tao Travel Array to Shao Chun, Xu Feng's figure began to fade away. Seeing this, Shao Chun called out, "Senior. Haha boy, this old man is just a remnant soul. Now that the tempered battle body has been inherited, it's time for me to leave. Cultivate well. Once the power of the Tao Travel Array is exhausted, no matter what the result is, you will be safely sent out of the 100 Refinements Valley." The tempered battle physique had finally found a successor. As such, Xu Feng naturally lost the meaning of staying. At the same time, with Shao Chun obtaining the tempered battle physique, the 100 Refinements Valley would become an ordinary cultivation secret realm. There would no longer be an opportunity like Shao Chun this time. There would only be an ordinary infusion of spirit qi left. Xu Feng laughed heartily. As soon as his laughter fell, he disappeared in front of Shao Chun. Xu Feng was gone, and the last remnant of his soul dissipated between heaven and earth. Shao Chun bowed in Xu Feng's direction. He didn't say anything. This time, he had obtained a great opportunity from Xu Feng, but Shao Chun couldn't help him. He could only hope that he would have a safe journey. After calming his mind, Shao Chun roughly studied the cultivation method of the tempered battle body. Soon, he felt helpless. The amount of resources needed to cultivate the tempered battle body was simply astronomical. Shao Chun had already set foot in the golden armor realm, but the gap between him and the jade internal organs realm was shocking. Therefore, it was probably impossible to improve the tempered battle body in a short time. For the time being, it was impossible to improve the tempered battle body. Shao Chun slowly walked into the Dao Travel Array and sat down cross-legged. As soon as Shao Chun sat down, the Dao Travel Array was activated. A golden light soared into the sky, enveloping Shao Chun's body. At the same time as Shao Chun entered the Dao Travel Array, Gu Lingyao was also sitting cross-legged in a Dao Travel Array in Gu Qi's residence. If Shao Chun was here, he would definitely recognize that this was a Dao Travel Array. Gu Qi had also carved a Dao Travel Array for Gu Lingyao to help him break through to the Dao Validation Realm. Of course, Gu Qi had spent a lot to carve this Dao Travel Array. Therefore, with the strength of Tianqi sect, it was only enough to carve this Dao Travel Array. Obviously, Chao He didn't have this opportunity. Shao Chun and Gu Lingyao were both relying on the help of the Dao Travel Array to break through to the Dao Validation Realm, making the final preparations for the upcoming Sage Sect selection. However, Gu Lingyao's Dao Travel Array was given by Gu Qi, while Shao Chun's Dao Travel Array was given by Xu Feng. Time passed day by day, and the day of the Sage Sect's selection drew closer and closer. Shao Chun did not know how long he had been cultivating in the Wei formation. On this day, the aura on Shao Chun's body finally changed, and the barrier of the Wei proving realm in his body was broken. Breakthrough, his cultivation had finally broken through. From the Dao querying realm, he had broken through to the Dao validation realm. The Dao validation realm was a whole new realm. Without a doubt, the breakthrough of a major realm caused Shao Chun's strength to change dramatically. His aura rose steadily. Finally, after a full quarter of an hour, Shao Chun's aura slowly stabilized at the Dao validation realm. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly to reveal a smile. This trip to the 100 Refinements Valley was simply unexpected. Not only did his cultivation level rise from the Dao querying realm all the way to the Dao validation realm, but he also obtained a peerless body tempering cultivation technique, the 100 Refinements Battle Body. It could be said that this trip to the Valley of 100 Refinements was worth more than a decade of Shao Chun's hard work, and this was not even taking into account the 100 Refinements Battle Body. Otherwise, he really did not know how to evaluate this trip to the Valley of 100 Refinement. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 540. It could be said that Shao Chun had earned a lot from this trip to the 100 Refinements Valley. His strength had undergone an earth-shattering change. He slowly opened his eyes with a faint smile on his lip. This trip is really worth it. Just as Shao Chun's cultivation base broke through, the Taoist formation also slowly disappeared. Just as Xu Feng had said, this Taoist formation was a one-time use talisman formation. It would automatically disappear after being used. The power of the Taoist formation was exhausted, but Shao Chun's cultivation base had also successfully broken through. At this moment, a powerful repulsive force enveloped Shao Chun. Obviously, The power of law in the 100 Refinements Valley wanted to forcefully send Xiao Chen out. In more than a month, Xiao Chen had obtained unexpected benefits in the 100 Refinements Valley. Before leaving, Xiao Chen bowed to the front and said, "Senior Xu Feng, Junior Xiao Chen is leaving." "Senior, don't worry. The 100 Refinements battle body is in Junior's hands. I will definitely not disgrace it." Following Xiao Chen's words, his body slowly disappeared as he was sent out by the power of law in the 100 Refinements Valley. Just as Xiao Chen was about to leave the 100 Refinements Valley, a total of 60 supreme disciples of the Tianqi sect had already gathered in the Tianqi sect's sect master's square. At the same time, Chao He and Gu Lingyao stood at the front while Gu Qi and the elders of the Tianqi sect appeared one after another. However, Gu Qi had an anxious look on his face. Today was already the day to rush to the Glory Sect's selection, but Xiao Chen still had not come out of the 100 Refinements Valley. This made Gu Qi a little anxious. What's going on with this kid? Could something have happened to him? Gu Qi thought to himself. There was no time to wait. If they did not set off today, the Tianqi sect would not be able to make it in time for the Glory Sect's selection. Seeing Gu Qi's ugly expression, Great Elder Tian Guochuan said helplessly, "Sect Master, I'm afraid there's no time to wait. If we wait any longer, we won't be able to make it in time." Because they were leaving for the Glory Sect's selection today, Tian Guochuan did not continue to wait at the back of the mountain. Hearing Tian Guochuan's words, Gu Qi nodded his head with an ugly expression. Indeed, they could not wait any longer. He was about to give the order to set off. Seeing this, Gu Lingyao below, after going through the 100 Refinements Valley and the Dao Travel Array, Gu Lingyao successfully broke through to the Dao Validation Realm. As for Chao He, she was still at the lesser perfection Dao Querying Realm. This was the difference in cultivation resources. Logically speaking, Chao He was also a king of pride. Even if her talent was not as good as Gu Lingyao's, the difference should not be too great. But now, due to the difference in cultivation resources, Chao He was left behind by Gu Lingyao. This was the foundation of a large sect, and this was the terrifying aspect of cultivation resources. However, when a large sect decided to give the majority of its cultivation resources to a single disciple, that disciple's rate of improvement would be unimaginable. In a short period of time, it was completely possible for a qualitative improvement to occur, just like Gu Lingyao. With the help of Gu Qi's Tianqi sect's cultivation resources, Gu Lingyao broke through to the Dao Validation Realm and widened the gap between him and Chao He. Therefore, even if one was a king of pride and had a talent that others looked up to, without cultivation resources, one could only watch helplessly as the gap between them widened. In fact, Gu Qi naturally wanted to nurture Chao He. But unfortunately, Tianqi sect's strength was not enough for both Gu Lingyao and Chao He to break through to the Dao Validation Realm at the same time. Therefore, he had to give up on one of them and focus on nurturing the other. Between Gu Lingyao and Chao He, Gu Qi naturally chose Gu Lingyao without hesitation. Of course, it was not only Tianqi sect that was like this. All the other large sects in Tianfeng Prefecture were the same. In the final sprint before the Glory Sect selection, all the large sects could only choose to take out all their cultivation resources and pour them heavily on one disciple. Only then could that disciple lead the others to achieve good results during the Glory Sect selection. Even though his cultivation base and combat strength had increased tremendously, Gu Lingyao did not have the slightest bit of joy on his face. Instead, he was filled with worry as he cursed in his heart. "Stupid Xiao Chen, what's wrong with you? If you don't come now, you won't be able to make it." Gu Lingyao was worried about Xiao Chen. After all, they were about to set off. If Xiao Chen did not make it, he would miss the Glory Sect selection. Gu Lingyao was worried, but there was nothing he could do. Seeing that Xiao Chen still did not appear, Gu Qi helplessly took a deep breath and shouted, "I hope you can achieve good results for our Tianqi sect in this Glory Sect selection." Alright, let's go. As soon as Gu Qi finished speaking, the teleportation formation on the main square lit up with a beam of light that shot into the sky. Then, under the lead of Tian Guochuan and the other two Dao Emperor Realm elders, the disciples participating in the glory sect selection walked into the teleportation formation and disappeared. They could not wait any longer. But before they left, Gu Lingyao and Mu Feng both looked towards the back mountain of Tianqi sect. Unfortunately, even at the last moment, Xiao Chun still did not make it. Soon, everyone disappeared through the teleportation formation. Then, the teleportation formation closed. Gu Qi sighed and said helplessly, "Still didn't make it?" Gu Qi was naturally talking about Xiao Chun. In the end, he still did not make it. But at this moment, an elder beside Gu Qi cried out in surprise. "Sect Master, look! The back mountain, the back mountain!" The elder suddenly cried out in surprise. Hearing this, Gu Qi also looked towards the back mountain. The black door that was originally towering in the sky was actually starting to disappear slowly. When the black door disappeared, Gu Qi immediately disappeared from the spot and rushed towards the back mountain. With Gu Qi's speed, he arrived at the back mountain in an instant. At this moment, the black door had already disappeared, and on the peak of the back mountain, Xiao Chen in white appeared before Gu Qi's eyes. He was finally out. But after sensing that Xiao Chen's cultivation had also broken through to the Dao validation realm, Gu Qi was stunned at first. But soon, he revealed a smile and said, "Seems like this kid has also gotten a lot of benefits. I wonder if he got the tempered battle body. If he did, this kid would probably soar to the sky." Gu Qi was very happy with Xiao Chen's appearance because with Xiao Chen around, Tianqi sect would have a greater chance of winning the glory sect's selection this time. Taking a step forward, he instantly appeared in front of Xiao Chen. Upon seeing Gu Qi, Xiao Chen bowed and called out, "Sect Master. You're finally willing to come out, little guy? Cut the crap and follow me. The others have already rushed to the glory sect's selection. You should go too, or you won't make it in time." Gu Qi had a lot of questions to ask Xiao Chen, but time was of the essence. Moreover, Gu Qi did not intend to delve into the matter of the tempered battle body. Therefore, as soon as they met, Gu Qi brought Xiao Chen to the main square without any explanation. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 541. Gu Qi did not ask Xiao Chen anything about the 100 Refinements Valley. Although Gu Qi knew what was in the 36th heaven of the 100 Refinements Valley, he also knew very well that with his conditions, it was impossible for him to cultivate the 100 Refinements battle body, even if he had now broken through to the Saint Realm. Therefore, it made no difference to Gu Qi whether he asked or not. Now that the sage sect selection had begun, the others had already left. Xiao Chen naturally had to catch up as soon as possible. If he missed the time, he would not be able to participate in the sage sect selection this time. Gu Qi brought Xiao Chen directly to the main square. In just a few breaths' time, Gu Qi returned with Xiao Chen following behind him. The few elders who were still in the main square had a change in expression. Sect Master, Xiao Chen. No one expected Xiao Chen to appear at this juncture. Tian Guochuan and the others had already left with the large group. Without wasting any time, Gu Qi immediately shouted, "Activate the teleportation formation and send Xiao Chen to the Tianfeng Prefecture City. Zhang Tong, you are responsible for protecting Xiao Chen all the way to the Tianfeng Prefecture City." Once again, Gu Qi activated the teleportation formation and sent another elder to protect Xiao Chen all the way to the Tianfeng Prefecture City. Hearing Gu Qi's words, the elder called Zhang Tong responded respectfully. The teleportation portal was soon activated again. Xiao Chen entered the portal under the protection of Zhang Tong. Before he left, Gu Qi seemed to have guessed what Xiao Chen was thinking, so he said, "Don't worry about it. Time is of the essence. Chat with Elder Zhang as you walk." Elder Zhang will tell you the rules of the sage sect selection on the way. Xiao Chen knew nothing about the rules of the sage sect selection. However, after hearing Gu Qi's words, Xiao Chen still nodded slightly. The distance from the celestial equal sect to the Tianfeng prefecture city was very far. Along the way, one would have to switch between teleportation formations several times. If one were to rely on manpower, even a Dao Emperor would need half a month. This showed how far the distance between the two places was. Under Zhang Tong's protection, there was nothing to worry about. At the same time, Zhang Tong had also informed Xiao Chen of the rules of the Glory Sect's selection. Firstly, the location of the Glory Sect's selection was in Tianfeng Prefecture City. Just from the name itself, one would know that this was the center of Tianfeng Prefecture. It was also the largest and most prosperous city in Tianfeng Prefecture, directly under Tianfeng Xingzong. Furthermore, Tianfeng Xingzong's mountain gate was built on Tianfeng Sacred Mountain, not far from Tianfeng Prefecture City. Every time the Glory Sect selection started, all the major forces within the Tianfeng Prefecture would send out their disciples. Of course, there was a limit to the number of disciples that each force could send out. For example, Tianqi Sect had 70 spots. However, with Tianqi Sect as an example, out of the 70 spots, only 10 of them were qualified to participate in the Sage Sect selection. As for the other 60 spots, they were called vassals. The simplest explanation for being vassals was that they would not participate in the Sage Sect selection. Furthermore, Tianfeng Xingzong would not care about their performance in the Sage Sect selection. The reason why these vassals would participate in the Sage Sect selection was to help the 10 participants enter Tianfeng Xingzong successfully and achieve good results in the Sage Sect selection. This was also the rule set by Tianfeng Xingzong. As for why this was the case, it was because of the location of the Sage Sect selection, the Dark Prison Secret Realm. Every time the Sage Sect selection was held in the Dark Prison Secret Realm, the Dark Prison Secret Realm was a place that Tianfeng Xingzong specially used to imprison criminals. It was a small independent world. For example, some martial artists who had committed heinous crimes, or some demonic beasts, as long as they were captured by Tianfeng Xingzong would imprison them in the Dark Prison Secret Realm. These criminals who were imprisoned in the Dark Prison Secret Realm naturally became the test mission for Xiao Chen and the others. According to the rules of the Sage Sect selection, after entering the Dark Prison Secret Realm, each participant could use any method to kill the criminals in the Dark Prison Secret Realm. Every time they killed a criminal, they would be able to obtain a certain amount of points. If a vassal killed a criminal, they could voluntarily hand over the points to any participant. As such, at the end of the Sage Sect selection, the person with the highest points would naturally be able to enter Tianfeng Xingzong, and could even become a core disciple directly. According to the different cultivation realms, the points obtained after each criminal was killed would be different. Of course, one could also choose to steal the points from other forces. Don't think that the criminals locked up in the Dark Prison Secret Realm were simple. One had to know that to be locked up in the Dark Prison Secret Realm meant that one had committed heinous crimes. None of the criminals in the Dark Prison Secret Realm were easy missions. At the same time, there were also those with high cultivation realms. Of course, in order to ensure the unity of the Sage Sect selection, martial artists of Dao King Realm and above were all locked up separately. In other words, during the selection period, the highest they would meet would only be Dao Transformation Realm martial artists. But this was already very ridiculous. Perhaps it was because of this reason that Tianfeng Xingzong created some vassals, giving more spots to the various forces. After all, if the number of vassals was too small, then participants like Xiao Chen, who had entered the Dark Prison Secret Realm, would have a hard time surviving. Secondly, the reason for increasing the number of vassals was to test the participants' commanding abilities. After all, a disciple of Tianfeng Xingzong not only had to be strong, but also couldn't be weak in other aspects. This sage sex selection was to test one's cohesiveness, commanding ability, judgment, and so on. Therefore, whether or not one could command these vassals to achieve good results was also a test for the participant. After all, in the environment of the dark prison secret realm, it was impossible to rely on one person. This was because the cultivation realms of the criminals were all higher than the participants. Therefore, if one wanted to kill them, they could only rely on teamwork. Of course, the true monsters were not included in this list. After explaining the sage sex selection to Xiao Chen in detail, Xiao Chen and Zhang Tong successfully arrived at Tianfeng Prefecture City a day later. Stepping out of the transportation portal of Tianfeng Prefecture City, Xiao Chen's eyes were filled with awe as he looked at the largest city in the entire Tianfeng Prefecture City. Although he could only see the corner of Tianfeng Prefecture City's close, Xiao Chen could only use one word to describe such a city: magnificent. That's right, Tianfeng Prefecture City gave off the feeling of magnificence. Compared to Tianfeng Prefecture City, Wuyu Empire's capital city and Tianlang Empire's capital city were like small villages deep in the mountains. Tianfeng Prefecture City was so huge that it was impossible to describe it properly. Let's put it this way. Xiao Chen and Zhang Tong were currently at the west side of Tianfeng Prefecture City. However, if they wanted to head to the east side, even if they were to fly with Xiao Chen's speed, it would still take them at least a day. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.